The story begins at the university hospital, with Kim stating that he truly wants to live. In Kim Yi-sak's diagnosis, a rare disease is revealed, one without a complete diagnosis and without a name until now. The doctor says that this is something never seen before, and that they will probably name it after the protagonist. Holding the medical report and trembling, the protagonist hears the doctor say that he is sorry. The best estimate is that he has at least half a year to live. After the shocking news, the protagonist leaves the hospital and wanders the streets, completely shaken, without looking ahead. With a distressed expression, waiting for the traffic light to turn green, he cannot accept having worked his whole life like an ant, only to find out that just when things finally seem to be getting better, the end is near. Kim starts crossing the street even though the light is red, while cars honk at him, until someone pushes him, saying that it is dangerous, causing him to fall onto the sidewalk, and with that, a ticket falls from his pocket. Kim cannot believe the news that he only has a few months left to live. Looking at the lottery ticket that fell from his pocket, he is outraged because he had just won. Lying in the middle of the street under the rain, he once again states that he does not want to die. He picks up the ticket, thinking that he would do anything to survive. In desperation, he begs for someone to save him. Please. That was the protagonist's past, and now he thinks that he did not mean it literally because it was not okay to be turned into something like this. Of all the things he could have reincarnated into, he wonders why it had to be a bald skeleton, as he cannot like anything about this body. Suddenly, monsters start advancing from behind, but he quickly turns around. After drawing his sword, he instantly exterminates them without difficulty and declares that he will wipe them all out. After the brief fight, he lowers his sword, but it doesn't take long before he hears something approaching. As he turns, he comes face to face with a gigantic monster, which swiftly attacks him, but Kim manages to jump. While hovering in the air, he looks directly into the monster's eyes and thinks that the moment has finally arrived. Then, he prepares a strike and declares that he will put an end to all this crap. The monster, seeing the attack coming, is unable to do anything and has its neck severed by Kim's powerful sword. Watching the monster's head fall to the ground, he states that the last one is finally gone and that the extermination of the rebel forces is complete. After reincarnating as a skeleton, a low-class monster, Kim evolved into an undead called a lich and brought prosperity to the demon realm, which was on the verge of ruin. This leads him to reflect that, even though he is bald, at least now he is a great demon king. All the monsters of the realm begin to salute him, calling him King Isak, which irritates him and makes him ask how many times he will have to say that his name is Yisak, calling his subordinates idiots. He announces to everyone that he is leaving. One of the demons asks where he is going, and the king replies that he is going to take what is owed to him. Kim's ultimate goal is, in fact, to be able to eat and even feel pain, transforming into a human. Sometime later, the head of the gigantic monster the protagonist killed is thrown to the ground, leaving some people in shock. With a smile, the protagonist begins to climb the stairs of the divine realm. He says that he has finally dealt with all the factions that challenge the gods and hopes they have not forgotten their promise because, according to the contract, they must turn him into a human. The people at the altar, watching that, start to wonder if he really dealt with everyone, as they thought it would take him about 500 years. One of them approaches a woman and whispers that the gods made that contract just so Kim would become their slave. The protagonist, observing, warns that he can hear all of them and asks why they are stalling since they said they would turn him into a human if he dealt with all of them. A blonde man at the altar asks if he can do one more thing for them. This irritates the protagonist, who reflects that those guys think that, since he is a skeleton, he doesn't think at all. Then, with his eyes red with rage, he asks if they are trying to make a fool out of him, thinking that he will make them all pay, whether they are gods or not. Kim begins to emit a dense and terrifying aura and, calling them bastards, asks again if they are not going to fulfill the contract. One of the goddesses, worried, comments that he found out, and the other replies that this is why she was against all of that from the start. Kim continues questioning whether they will answer him, and emphasizes that since he was summoned using a forbidden art, the laws of nature do not apply to him. Thus, they can't do anything as he can't even die of old age since he is an undead. Moreover, the abilities he possesses are a threat to the divine realm. With a sinister look, he warns that if they do not turn him into a human, suddenly, one of the gods interrupts, asking him to wait a little longer and do a few more favors. But the king ignores them and, concentrating energy in his hands, says that since they failed to keep their promise, they will all pay with their lives. Kim raises his hand, concentrating energy like a Genki Dama, and shouts that it is time for all of them to become skeletons just like him. The gods, watching that, begin to panic, while the protagonist continues accumulating energy and letting out a terrifying laugh. But suddenly, he notices that the energy starts disappearing from his hands, and when he tries to move, he realizes that he is also paralyzed. Then, one of the gods starts smiling and calls him an idiot. Holding something in his palm, he says that whoever's name is written there will not be able to move, no matter who they are, displaying an insect in his hand with the name Isaac written on it. Quickly, all the gods gather, and he says that this is the banishment of disaster, a high-level sacred art used to seal disasters like Kim, emphasizing that he should be grateful for having had a contract with the gods. But since he dared to challenge them, he will now live as an insect. Still paralyzed, the protagonist asks if he couldn't at least have been a fluffy caterpillar or something like that, and the god asks why he is so obsessed with hair, calling him an inferior creature. But suddenly, the insect begins to emit an intense glow, leaving one of the gods confused and asking what the hell that was. Quickly, the protagonist starts smiling and, calling them fools, says they should have been smarter instead of telling him everything. Commenting that he would rather self-destruct than live as an insect, he starts emitting a bright light. While the gods rush to stop him, he sends them all to hell, and after intensifying the powerful light even further, he creates a colossal explosion. Irritated, the gods wonder if he is insane until they quickly notice the insect. As they approach, the blonde man asks if the effect worked. The goddess responds that apparently, it did, pointing out that Kim's soul remains sealed, thanks to the gods. Soon they gather, and one of them says that now that he is gone, they will regain their strength again. Another one confirms, commenting that whenever a demon disappears, they become stronger, but he warns that they cannot let their guard down because they do not know when another disaster like him might be born. That is why they must create a perfect vassal or a saint in the human realm to exterminate the entire demon race. While the blonde man picks up the insect, the red-haired woman asks if he is okay since he has already used a lot of power that day, but he tells her not to worry and that he needs to select an appropriate soul to place in the body of a saint. Holding the insect in his hand, he states that, as for the demon king, she should torture him like an insect for all eternity. After some time, the protagonist begins to regain consciousness, feeling a headache and thinking he is going crazy. Upon opening his eyes, he remembers that the gods deceived him and wonders if he ended up like this because he became a skeleton. But suddenly, he realizes that he has hands and questions why, since he had transformed into an insect. He also does not understand what that intense light is. Looking at his own hands, he continues questioning why and what that warm sensation he is feeling is until he finally realizes that he is in a human body. This leads him to conclude that the gods, who wanted to exterminate him, ended up mixing things up. Suddenly, he hears someone calling him a saint. A woman approaches slightly, saying that the saint has opened his eyes, which makes him ponder the word saint. The woman, delighted, asks why he woke up from his little nap, and the man responds that it would have been great if he had just kept sleeping. The protagonist observes everything and wonders if those people are his caretakers, and if he really became human. But he notices that both have a grim expression, and the man says that, unfortunately, they have to work, and apologizes that he has just woken up. Shaking a baby bottle with a strange liquid, he concludes that the saint must go back to sleep forever and in peace. This terrifies the protagonist. Trying to move desperately, he reflects that he has barely just died, and now he has to die again. The man starts approaching with the baby bottle, and with a malicious smile, apologizes, calling him Your Holiness, but emphasizes that he must put him to sleep forever. Then, he brings the bottle closer to the protagonist's mouth, but he starts dodging from side to side, even putting his hand in front of it. This leaves the two perplexed, questioning why he is not drinking, while the protagonist wonders if they are joking, because now that he has finally become human, he will not drink something that suspicious. Stopping to think more carefully, he ponders how he became human. Meanwhile, the man keeps insisting that he drink and sleep deeply, calling him Lord Isaac. They try to force him to drink, but the protagonist manages to resist, which makes the man wonder why a baby is so strong. Until finally, he manages to put the bottle in the protagonist's mouth, who, upon tasting the liquid, notices that it tastes like vegetable juice, which he finds horrible. Quickly, he begins to feel something strange, and with blurred vision, he sees the two looking at him and smiling while feeling something sinister entering his body. After some time, in the Holy Empire of Hela, in the Central Western Temple, a bishop and a servant walk through the corridors. The bishop thinks that by now, that baby must be in his final moments of life. Without meaning to, he bumps into a man who tells the bishop that he looks quite vigorous. This man is the emperor of the Holy Empire of Hela, Alexander Heathcliff Hela. Immediately, the bishop and the servants bow, saluting the son of the empire. Then Alexander asks what he needs, and the bishop replies that they are there to greet the candidate for sainthood from the house of Yeshua, emphasizing that the representative of the holy faith must be present to greet his holiness. The emperor, with a cold gaze, says that he makes it sound like a burden, and comments that he must be present because he is the saint. He asks if it wouldn't be a huge problem if something went wrong again after the candidate for sainthood was left in the care of the holy faith. But before the old man could respond, they hear someone shouting something about the young master, which makes the bishop display a subtle, malicious smile. Immediately, the emperor and his guards rush to see what was happening, and upon opening the door, Alexander asks what happened to the young master. One of the nannies, apparently frightened, says that he is very cute, which leaves the emperor more lost than an olive in a toothless mouth. While they watch the protagonist in the crib smiling, one of the nannies comments on how full he is, emphasizing that he drank the entire bottle. Another mentions that he has already consumed 15 bottles of that tasteless vegetable juice, and upon hearing that, the bishop thinks it's impossible, questioning how he is still alive after drinking all that, since it's not just vegetable juice. A few minutes earlier, when the protagonist began to feel something sinister entering his body, he was shocked to realize that he had ingested sacred poison, a devastating toxin that destroys the divine power of clergy members. Although it has no immediate effects, being a poison, it becomes lethal if too much accumulates in the body. However, that poison is made from demon mana, so as a former demon king, it was perfect for him, as giving things made of mana to a demon like Isaac makes him feel better than ever, wanting to consume more and more of that mana-infused substance. After the first bottle, the protagonist throws it to the ground and makes sounds that make the two realize he is asking for more. The man quickly gives him another bottle, saying they are happy to give him more, and that the vegetable juice will not show its effects immediately. Meanwhile, the protagonist, giving a thumbs up, reflects that he is absorbing the mana perfectly, and that from now on, he needs to enter the world beyond the conscious mind, the unconscious world, and in the deepest part, at the source of the world, he will create the mana core, as that is a safe place. With this, Isaac begins to concentrate, and, creating a ball of energy in his hands, starts placing the absorbed mana inside the core, as he needs a mana core to use it later, so he will prepare it first. But suddenly, the core begins to explode before him, leaving him shocked. Observing more closely, he reflects that the core should have one of the 3 primary colors. Analyzing the explosion, he wonders why that light is white. But soon he thinks that the color is not the issue, which makes him question how such an amount of power can be present inside a small core that is not even fully formed yet. With a smile, he concludes that this is beyond his expectations. Then, with great effort, Kim begins walking toward the core, questioning how many blessings are accumulated in that baby's body, and thinking that, if he manages to grow well, he could become a monster far greater than he ever imagined. Upon reaching the core, the protagonist reads his own name and clicks on Survive, reflecting that this was the desperate desire deeply engraved in his soul, survival, because no matter what, he wanted to survive. In the end, when it became the genesis of the Skeleton King, he was able to create buffs and unique original abilities, and all those spells were inherited by this body. After some time and a few bottles, the man, already tired, asks if the baby has finally passed away, and the woman asks him to check. Then, suddenly, the protagonist raises a finger, leaving the man in panic, unable to believe that he is still alive. Pointing upward, Kim tries to say something, making his caretakers nervous, and with a bizarre expression, he asks for another bottle, an even stronger one. Back in the present, the emperor says it is a relief that nothing bad happened to the boy. Hearing this, Isaac reflects that, despite almost being assassinated, nothing bad really happened. Suddenly the bishop is startled, thinking that the baby is staring at him, but in reality, the protagonist is looking at the bottles, wondering if he drank too much. He then thinks he should act naturally to avoid suspicion and starts smiling like a normal baby. This extremely irritates the bishop, who wonders what is wrong with that damn baby, as he should be extremely ill and nearly lifeless, but instead, he is smiling naturally. A few days ago, at the headquarters of the Holy Faith, a man says that whoever becomes the saint will take possession of the sacred empire. Another man, holding a chalice, responds that this is a joke and that, for this reason, they are declaring their children as the saint, emphasizing that those noble families are irritating. The bishop tells him not to worry, as they will deal with all the saint candidates, making the man smile, saying that would be great. The man with the chalice also comments that he heard a rather annoying rumor, that a saint candidate appeared in the MANHUA household, which is the emperor's right-hand family. Tense, the bishop says they cannot do anything about it. Then, the man throws his chalice to the ground, and as the wine spreads, the bishop says it is likely that the candidate will be lifeless before arriving there. The man says he just needs to check the body to be sure. This man is the cardinal and head of the Barrett household, Harry Barrett, who, with a sinister smile, declares that the saint can only come from his house. Back in the present, the bishop observes the protagonist, remembering that he was told the baby was already lifeless. This irritates him, as he does not understand why he is still alive, and he cannot let this continue. Meanwhile, the emperor plays with Isaac and says it is interesting to see such bright and light-colored hair, like that of the founder of the Sacred Empire, asking the bishop what he thinks about it. This shocks the bishop, who thinks the emperor should not utter such blasphemy. Observing the protagonist closely, the bishop deduces that the boy truly is the emperor. Alexander comments that he seems even more blessed than the current pope and should be the final candidate for sainthood. Hearing this, the protagonist nearly has a heart attack, realizing that he has reincarnated as a saint candidate baby, and that this is why everyone keeps calling him a saint, not because he is cute. While the bishop reflects that Alexander is starting to favor the child, and that he cannot allow this to happen, he asks Alexander to let him examine the child, making him suspicious, and ask why and what the problem is. The bishop responds that something is strange, as it is impossible for a baby to have drunk that entire vegetable juice, which makes the emperor question what is so strange about a saint candidate eating a lot. Meanwhile, the protagonist, almost falling asleep, wonders how he, the demon king, ended up becoming a saint candidate. The bishop continues insisting that this is strange, and warns that someone from the MANHUA household is on their way to examine him. Suddenly, Isaac burps out dark energy and is shocked to realize that he has released the demonic energy he failed to digest. He becomes tense, wondering if he has been caught, and soon hears the bishop being summoned by the emperor, saying that he just felt demonic energy coming from that child. The bishop observes the baby with a sinister look and asks again if that isn't strange, while the protagonist, terrified, continues pondering whether he noticed. The old man says that the child must be a false candidate with mana and that they need an inquisitor to examine her immediately. This makes Isaac even more nervous, concluding that he has indeed been discovered. But then he hears Alexander asking how the bishop dares to say such a thing, as he is referring to a candidate for sainthood. The bishop argues that he doesn't need to worry because the pope has already decided that the saint will be a child from the Barrett house, surprising the emperor, who thinks that choosing a child from his own house is shameful. With this, the protagonist finally understands why they want to get rid of him. Suddenly, the bishop picks him up from the crib and says he will ask the priest to bring an inquisitor, but Alexander extends his hand and asks him to wait. He states that the MANHUA house is a close ally of the imperial family and, as emperor, strongly suggests that they examine the child later. The bishop replies that he understands but says he has already spoken with the pope, who stated that he will only hold the blessing ceremony for the crown prince after the saint selection ceremony. That news leaves Alexander completely shocked, reflecting that the pope plans to refuse recognition of his son unless he agrees with the decision regarding the saint. Even the protagonist feels irritated upon hearing the bishop's words, but he soon thinks that, in reality, he doesn't want to continue being a candidate for sainthood because it is too risky, and they might end up discovering his true identity. The old man, still holding the protagonist in his arms and smiling, says they can examine the child now but fails to notice Isaac trying to do something with the baby bottle until he finally grabs it, as if intending to hit the bishop with it. The old man says they will use the sacred exorcism art, and that if the boy is truly human, he won't be affected. However, if he is a demon, he will be. Before he can finish the sentence, the protagonist, with the baby bottle emitting a strong glow, attacks him directly in the face with such force that it knocks out one of his teeth. Isaac, smiling as he sees the tooth fly, concludes that he will join that arrogant bastard's little game. The old man, his face wrecked, becomes furious, wondering how a baby bottle can hurt so much, while the emperor, after observing the glow emitted by the bottle, deduces that the boy must truly be the saint. Kim, with an adorable expression, can't believe he felt a bit of divine power, which excites him. Preparing another attack, he strikes the bishop again, without hesitation. Enjoying himself, he continues beating the bishop with the baby bottle at an absurd speed. Watching the beating, the emperor, extremely excited, concludes that this is definitely mana. Meanwhile, the protagonist decides to make the baby bottle more durable with strengthening magic and deliver the final blow while pretending to be an innocent baby. Without thinking twice, he lands the finishing strike on the bishop using the bottom of the bottle, And, observing the scene, Alexander thinks that the bishop must be loving the boy's divine power. Suddenly, Isaac looks at the baby bottle and notices something different, wondering what it is, since every time he uses mana, he feels a greater amount of magical power. However, mana and magical power are incompatible and cannot be used together, so it must have something to do with that white mana core. After being beaten like a condemned man, the bishop manages to grab the baby bottle and snatches it from the protagonist. Throwing her to the ground, the bishop swears by everything he has that the baby is a sinner and that they must immediately proceed with the sacred art of exorcism. Hearing that, Kim mentally insults him and, searching for something in the old man's pocket, contemplates that he didn't want to go that far but will have to do it. After searching, he notices something interesting hidden there and removes a kind of totem in the shape of a demonic arm with a rosary. Immediately, the bishop is paralyzed, as that is a high-level sealed demonic body, a totem that utilizes the properties of a demon that devours others of its kind and absorbs their mana, something the bishop kept with him, in case he encountered a demon and needed to fight. Looking at the protagonist, who displays a bizarre smile, he asks how that baby knew about the artifact. Unexpectedly, he notices the item flying over his shoulder and realizes that Isaac had thrown it forcefully, while the protagonist, watching the item fall, tells himself that the old man will pay for continuously annoying him. As soon as the totem hits the ground, he concludes that these will be the consequences of the bishop's own actions. Immediately, Kim snaps his fingers, and a shadowy demon begins to emerge from the totem, shocking everyone except Isaac, who, smiling, tells the old man to examine it. Everyone in the room is terrified, asking why a dark lich appeared there. Outraged, the emperor demands to know what the hell Bishop Martha Barrett is doing, and why he released a superior demon in the temple, questioning whether he has lost his mind. With a trembling voice, the bishop responds, asking if he didn't see that it was the baby who threw the totem, but Alexander retorts, saying that a totem is just an object used to seal a demonic beast, questioning how it came back to life. With that, he quickly orders the guards to protect the young lord from the evil demonic beast and the bishop. In the blink of an eye, one of the guards snatches the baby from Martha's hands, leaving him incredulous, while the protagonist mocks the bishop. Watching the guards surrounding the lich, Isaac thinks that now they will see just how good that bishop really is. But suddenly, a voice emerges saying, "Eliminate him!" And unexpectedly the enraged demon shouts, "Eliminate the saint!" This makes the protagonist uneasy. Quickly the demon charges toward him, but the guards, with determination, try to protect the young lord. The protagonist is confused, wondering what is wrong with that thing, as he saved the lich's life, and now it is trying to attack him. But he soon calms down, thinking that the paladins should be able to protect him, not noticing that one of the paladins was attacked and sent flying. Upon seeing the fallen man, both Isaac and the guard begin to tremble in fear, and he questions whether that guy is really a paladin. Wasting no time, the monster attacks again, saying, "Eliminate the saint, and save the captured king." Once more it strikes another paladin, sending him flying, and the protagonist, observing, reflects that he should have subdued it first, as no one would notice him using magic in such a situation. Quickly, the demon lunges at the protagonist, who, in the arms of the terrified guard, cannot understand why they are always trying to take his life. He sees the attack approaching and tries to understand why that demon is attempting to exterminate him when he himself brought it back to life. At the last moment before being attacked, Isaac reveals his terrifying demon king form and calls the lich an idiot, which immediately sends the demon into a panic. The protagonist then begins to concentrate and emits a powerful light, leaving the emperor and the guards stunned. The light quickly begins to strike the lich, who, feeling that energy, tries to escape slightly through the door. After the demon is expelled from the room, the guards comment that it was definitely divine power, and that the young master managed to drive out that creature. The paladin holding the protagonist says it's incredible that he did that at such a young age, and another responds that it is expected of the young lord, while Isaac, looking at his own hands, concludes that it truly is divine power. He realizes he has run out of mana, which makes him question whether this body is converting his mana into divine power. As the paladins arrest the bishop, the protagonist becomes irritated upon realizing that he will not be able to accumulate mana since the Holy Empire does not possess it. Furious, Martha says that the baby is a heretic who uses the powers of demons and questions how he managed to crawl into the Holy Empire. Suddenly he notices the emperor approaching and tells Alexander that he can prove it to them, as he will discover the true identity of that baby through an exorcism. But the emperor responds that it is enough, questioning how he dares accuse an innocent saint candidate and, moreover, has also freed a high-ranking demon right in front of the Imperial Knights. With a cold and determined look, Alexander says that he will certainly not ignore this matter, even if he is from the Holy Faith. This leaves the bishop tormented, reflecting that if the emperor is suspicious, they will soon discover the infiltrator, and if that happens, the Holy Faith may have problems as well. Stealthily, Martha manages to free one of his hands, thinking that even if he has to die to take responsibility for what happened, he must save his family's lives. After summoning a powerful red-eyed beast, he concludes that, for this reason, he must at least eliminate the saint candidate of the Eshua house. With that, the beast quickly charges at the protagonist, who concludes that the old man is finally showing his true nature, and he wonders if the bishop really thinks he can eliminate him with something like that. Suddenly the beast leaps, and upon realizing the imminent attack directed at him, Isaac remembers that he has no mana left. But unexpectedly, an energy emerges and attacks the wolf before it can do anything. Then, a man appears, asking who dares to lay hands on the direct lineage of the Eshua. He begins to walk, and accompanied by 2 other men, he is quickly recognized by the paladins as one of the knights of Eshua. The gray-haired man is the 7th son of the house, Rilai Eshua, who, pointing at the bishop, orders his immediate execution. As the warriors prepare to deal with Martha, the protagonist begins to reflect on Eshua, as he feels like he has heard that name before. Suddenly, Rilai turns and asks everyone to show their manners. Immediately, everyone kneels and bows, saluting the young master of the Eshua house. The 7th son approaches Isaac and apologizes for the delay, while he observes the knights and concludes that they are better than the Imperial Knights. Rilai then says that, although it is not much, they brought him a gift. The protagonist, watching one of the knights take the gift from his pocket, gets excited, thinking it will be a gold bar, but he soon sees that it is a figurine of the Skeleton King being decapitated, which shocks him. Next, they show another figurine of the Skeleton King being burned to ashes, and one of the saint crushing the Skeleton King, leaving Isaac frozen, without any reaction. While everyone praises him, calling him cute, a tear rolls down the protagonist's eye as he wonders how he will survive in such a crazy house. Upon observing his reaction, the warriors comment that he is enjoying the gift so much that he is even crying. Isaac begins to reflect on Eshua until he finally remembers that this name belongs to the saint of this generation who eliminated him. He recalls the past, the woman screaming that she is the 45th saint, Exo Eshua, and another introducing herself as the 61st saint, Ox Eshua, which causes the 45th to say that such a name is not meant for someone like her. With this, the protagonist remembers that they are all called something Eshua, which means that not only is he a candidate for sainthood, but he is also part of the same family as the saint, making him ponder the mistakes of his past life. Suddenly, they hear someone shout, "Damn Eshuas!" The warrior holding the bishop orders him to shut up, and he responds that he knew they were all damned heretics, questioning where they brought that creature from, and emphasizing that he will uncover the identity of that infernal baby. Without hesitation, one of the men begins to draw his sword while the bishop continues, saying he never imagined they would bring a monster there, and questioning if they have lost their minds. Upon concluding that this will end the Eshua lineage, the blade reaches his neck, delivering a precise cut that quickly begins to spray blood everywhere. Then, Rilai tells Martha to be grateful for the benevolence of the Eshua, who spared his neck despite all the nonsense he spoke. Watching the scene, Isaac concludes that Rilai is indeed useful, as he nearly beheaded the old man for insulting the family, and he wonders if he will have the necessary confidence to face Holy Faith. One of the warriors, holding one of the gifts, worriedly comments that the young lord has heard terrible things, and the man holding him agrees, emphasizing that he should hear only good things. This makes the protagonist think that he is surrounded by useless lunatics. Looking at the men's faces, he remembers that they were very strong since his subordinates would go crazy every time they saw the blue warriors. As he reflects on this, the warriors play with the figurines, attaching and detaching the head of the skeletal king doll. Suddenly, someone approaches, saying they owe the boy a debt. It is the emperor, who asks Rilai if he could tell the head of the Eshua household that the imperial palace wishes to raise the boy, but Rilai, irritated by the question, says his jokes are quite exaggerated. Hearing the conversation, Isaac is surprised to realize that he is being recruited by the imperial palace. The emperor retorts, saying that the Holy Empire will pursue the boy both internally and externally, asserting that Rilai knows this. Even though it is true that the Eshua are strong, he questions whether the current blue faith has what it takes to protect the child. The protagonist listens attentively to the conversation and notices that Rilai remains silent at this question. Then, he hears Alexander continue, saying that the Pope, in particular, will disapprove of the boy because his hair color symbolizes the ancestors of the Holy Empire. Furthermore, the skeletal king appears to be after the child. This leaves Isaac extremely confused because he himself is the skeletal king, making him wonder why the emperor is saying such things. Even after all these arguments, Relai picks up the child and, apologizing to the emperor, says that the child belongs to the direct lineage of the Yeshua, so they must raise him. As for the Pope and the skeletal king, the Yeshua family will deal with them, pointing out that if they encounter the skeletal king again, the previous Saint Melissa will be pleased. Alexander then responds ironically that he can certainly imagine so. The seventh son of the house questions once again how he could leave a direct descendant of Saint Melissa in the imperial palace. Immediately, the protagonist recalls the name Melissa, which horrifies him, as he remembers fighting against her right before going to the divine realm. Melissa was a mad saint, the most difficult to deal with. Isaac remembers her terrifying gaze as she called him "my little baby," and ponders the fact that he is a saint candidate born into the Holy Family, and, on top of that, a direct descendant of Melissa, which makes him question why his life is so miserable. What is a saint? The gods, who had lost to the skeleton king every time, wanted so badly to win that they created the ultimate weapon with all their efforts, an apple sent by the gods to destroy evil, the lion of the battlefield who wielded the sacred light, the great light of the Holy Empire, and the highest-ranking knight. Due to the saint's overwhelming power, people believed that the skeleton king would face his final days. She grew stronger with each generation, could live for a long time, possessed attack and defense close to those of the gods, and could self-destruct if necessary. However, the skeleton king was ruthless. Isaac remembered that he had never eliminated a saint. After all, that would not be good for them. If a saint were eliminated, and the divine power returned to the gods, they could simply send an evolved, even more powerful version. Recalling the last saint, Melissa, who was very strong, he reflects on her being his ancestor. Suddenly, Relai interrupts the protagonist's thoughts, commenting that the saint exists solely to destroy the skeleton king. She emphasizes that the Yeshua produce these saints and carry out the God's will, being a proud family with the ability to protect that child. Hearing all this, the emperor remains silent. Then, another knight says that Relai is right, arguing that countless saints have been martyred by the skeleton king. The protagonist disagrees, as he had never eliminated one. He continues, saying that the skeleton king once banished a saint to a labyrinth because he deemed her unfit for battle, leading to the deaths of 5 saints from stress-related illnesses. Hearing that story, Isaac tells himself that it's not his fault the saint was bad with labyrinths, and if they got sick, they should have gone to the hospital. Then, the 7th son of the Yeshua says it's fine since he has heard all the stories and doesn't care whether the boy is cursed or not. This irritates the protagonist, who wonders what curse they are talking about. Relai, with a smile, emphasizes that they are grateful he was born, and only wish for one thing, that he does not grow up to become as terrible as the skeleton king. This leaves the protagonist incredulous, and with some irony, he mentally apologizes for being a bad person. Even after hearing all that, Alexander insists that Relai reconsider, arguing that it has been 150 years since the skeleton king was sealed. This makes the protagonist wonder if that much time had really passed, and in that case, Melissa must have been gone for a long time, as he remembers that she was 50 years old when she last fought. The emperor continues arguing, saying that demons have become much stronger during this period, and that the saint is a great asset for the Holy Empire to increase its power. Therefore, the boy is also important to the Holy Empire. Moreover, there is currently no saint in Yeshua, as it has been a year since the saint gave birth to the boy, and disappeared with the father. That information leaves Isaac even more perplexed, shocked to discover that his mother was the saint. Relai says that may all be true, but the matriarch is still alive, and Yeshua can protect the boy. Meanwhile, the protagonist, still surprised, feels relieved that finally, all the surprises are over, until he hears the emperor ask whether Melissa isn't currently destroying the skeleton king's subordinates. Relai replies that she will return soon, and emphasizes that the matriarch is waiting for her grandson as well, which leaves the protagonist stunned, wondering if, at over 200 years old, she didn't feel bad. Alexander then retorts, saying that she will still take a long time before returning. Noticing Isaac's strange behavior, he asks if the boy is okay, and the knight promptly confirms, but the protagonist, completely terrified, thinks that he would also act strangely if he discovered that his greatest enemy was still alive. This leads him to conclude that if Melissa finds out about him, he will be destroyed on the spot. To survive, he will have to stay away from that family. Quickly, He grabs the emperor's finger and makes the famous lost puppy face, mentally begging to be taken by him, which charms Alexander and the other knights. With Isaac stretching himself entirely to reach Alexander, he asks Relai if he doesn't see that the boy wants to go to the imperial palace as well. Relai responds that the boy is just feeling needy, and that it's nothing serious. But the emperor, pulling the protagonist, emphasizes that the imperial palace can offer much to the young lord. He comments that the Eshua may be experienced in producing saints, but they have no experience in raising a holy boy. Quickly, Relai reacts and starts pulling him too, saying that this child will become an exorcist knight who will conquer evil. The Eshua family is known for producing the greatest exorcist knights. He points out that since Isaac is the first saint in history, the imperial palace also doesn't know how to deal with the boy. It doesn't take long before the two start pulling Isaac, one on each arm, fighting and arguing over the boy, which makes one of the warriors present ask them to calm down, as if they continue, they will tear the young lord in half, and the protagonist, in the middle of that war, reflects that he needs to go to the imperial palace if he wants to stay alive. After some time of discussion, he notices a light emitted by the emperor and recognizes it as the light that reacts with the origin of survival, remembering that it had come from Alexander from the beginning, which means his chances of survival are greater with him, so he cannot miss this opportunity. With that, Alexander says that the young lord has made a wise choice, and Isaac, still observing that light, wonders if that is. At nightfall, the bishop is kneeling on the grass, accompanied by hooded men, insisting that he is innocent, claiming that the boy used mana, and that it is definitely a place where demons are born. But the head of House Barrett, with his usual cold gaze, standing beside a subordinate drawing a sword, responds that divine power comes from the gods themselves, and asks if he is saying that the gods gave divine power to a lesser demon. Upon seeing the sword, the bishop becomes even more terrified and insists that it was definitely mana, emphasizing that it is impossible for him to have mistaken mana for divine power. But Here simply says that the holy city calls this kind of talk. Before the bishop can argue, he is struck directly in the throat by the sword. Watching the bishop's life fade away, Here finishes the sentence, saying that the city is full of blasphemy. After this, one of the men says they should form a reaper squad again, but the cardinal responds that it will not be necessary, as the emperor wants to take the child. They will have many opportunities in the imperial palace and will wait for them, concluding that this time he will not survive. Meanwhile, the protagonist in his cradle feels his ear itch and thinks that someone must be talking about him. The next morning, Isaac wakes up and realizes that, strangely, he is heading toward Eshua, which makes him question why. He remembers that a few days earlier, upon noticing an intense light, he wondered what it was and why it was so strong. He recalls Relai telling the emperor that Eshua would not be a good place to raise that child, emphasizing that their house could be seen as a place that stores mana cores and demonic bodies. Recalling the scene, Isaac wonders if that is the surviving origin of all that light. Looking directly at Relai's face, he remembers that the light became even more intense when he said that the most precious thing they had in the house was the skeleton king's body. This terrifies Isaac, who wonders why the Eshua are with him, reflecting that he should have stayed there from the start. The light made the protagonist choose to stay with the Eshua, leaving Relai confused. But Isaac, with all his cunning, makes positive gestures and gives the knight the famous puppy dog eyes, which immediately convinces him. Returning to the present while traveling in the carriage, he reflects that it's as if he were leaving life in the palace to serve in the army, but that is the only way to recover his own body. The protagonist remembers that this is a body he refined and accumulated enough mana in to fight against the gods, and if he gets his body back, reaching rank 10 will be a breeze. Since this was the first time he saw a survivor's light shine so brightly, it means that following his uncle to Eshua will be very beneficial for his survival. Inside the carriage, one of the knights questions Relai about why the sacred forces are still after the young master, a question that intrigues even the protagonist, who stands up to pay attention. Then, Relai responds that it is because the gods sent a prophecy that the saint would be received as a son of God. The knight then asks if that means he will become the next pope, and Relai promptly confirms, emphasizing that this is why House Barrett is so desperate to give birth to a saint. This information leaves the protagonist confused, wondering what is going on. He reflects that the Pope, the strongest man in the clergy, can use rank 10 magic, and is like the king of the clergy, and all paladins, an absolute being with power capable of challenging even the emperor. Isaac also recalls that House Barrett has given birth to popes for hundreds of years, and now that the position of pope can be taken by a saint, it makes sense that they are desperate. That's why the other houses are doing everything they can to give birth to a saint as well. Suddenly, a noise is heard outside, and upon checking, Relai hears the driver say that they have arrived at the duchy, but there is a problem. Quickly, the seventh son of the Eshua family notices 3 guards at the gate, and the one in the middle says he's sorry, but they cannot enter the duchy. While the protagonist tries to understand what is happening, Relai steps out, irritated, asking the guard how he dares to do that, questioning whether he does not recognize the seal of House Eshua and if they are really being taught properly. But the man, with a bizarre smile, says that it's obvious they won't be allowed to enter, and releasing a terrifying energy, concludes by saying that they need to eliminate the child who carries the blood of a saint. Quickly, the knight realizes that they are demons, while the protagonist wonders what the hell is going on, as he clearly remembers forbidding demons from attacking humans, which makes him ponder whether this is the work of the new demon king. The red-haired demon then points his finger, ordering them to pay attention, and says that the glorious king has commanded them to eliminate all saints and sacred beings. Hearing this, Isaac confirms that there really is a new demon king, and the monster continues, saying that under the command of the great skeleton king, Lord Isaac, they will exterminate the saint. This nearly drives the protagonist insane, questioning when he had ever given such an order. The long-eared demon then explains that if they hand over the child, perhaps the great skeleton king, Lord Isaac, will spare their lives. Suddenly, a lightning bolt strikes the creature, frying it in seconds and startling the other demons. Upon realizing it was the paladin, one of them calls him a coward. Then, Relai, with a furious tone, questions how those idiots dare to say such nonsense in front of him, an exorcist from the Eshua family. Pointing his sword, he shouts for them to pay attention, declaring that to protect the small things of this world, Eshua will destroy all evil. With that, an army of paladins appears, ready with their swords. Relai states that they will drag them to the depths of hell and destroy them from the inside out. He also remarks that the Skeleton King is a bastard who forces his subordinates to die for an immoral desire. Without hesitation, the demons charge, demanding how he dares insult Skeleton King Isaac, for all of this is for his life. The paladins do not hesitate either, and prepare for battle. One of the paladins, who is holding the protagonist, realizing the imminent fight, begins to run, carrying him away and apologizing, while utter chaos erupts in battle. Quickly, Isaac focuses and contemplates activating the origin of survival and unleashing magic. He concentrates even more, and calls for his summons to be heard, invoking something that is both magic and a being. Whisper, the observer. Unexpectedly, a being appears, with a dark expression and red eyes. The being begins calling for its master, but the protagonist immediately covers its mouth, telling it that it has been a while but that it must stay quiet so no one discovers it. After some time, left in the forest, the protagonist, surrounded by some kind of shield, hears the observer saying it truly thought it would never see him again, and Isaac responds that he also didn't think he would survive. Looking at the creature, he reflects that it is really good to see it since it is a being that detects magic and was created because he couldn't afford to stop and detect magic in the middle of a fight. After gaining consciousness, he started finding Whisper to be a cute being. Whisper then comments that the protagonist remains as wicked as ever and congratulates him for managing to steal a child's body. Flying back and forth, it continues, saying that those disgusting magic users touched its master and emphasizing that they cannot touch a baby's body with those filthy hands. But Isaac says that's enough and orders it to observe the enemies. Then, the sinister creature initiates detection magic, scanning the entire area and reporting that within a 100-meter radius of their current location, there are a total of 88 enemies, all demons, and that they won't be able to lay a finger on the young master. Isaac is shocked by the number of demons and wonders if they intend to start a war. Wasting no time, Whisper begins annihilating all the demons, leaving the knights in shock. Then, it returns to the protagonist and states that none remain. However, it has just detected a lich, who, furious at the warriors, demands how they dare lay their filthy hands on its king and declares that they will now pay with their lives. This leaves Isaac as terrified as the knights, wondering what the hell got into this guy. The shadowy lich questions the soldiers about how they dare trap its master in the body of an inferior baby, for, as gratitude for being freed, the shadow lich has developed an intense attachment to Isaac. The demon then warns the paladins not to even look at the master unless they wish to have their eyes torn out. The paladins, in shock, wonder what that creature is saying, as humans cannot understand the demon language. Both Whisper and the protagonist anxiously observe the scene, and Isaac reflects that the lich must have discovered he is the Skeleton King, and followed him there. Watching the knights charge at the monster, he concluded that it didn't need to appear in that form. From a distance, Isaac began making baby noises, trying to tell them not to mess with his food, as it was his source of high concentration mana, drawing the attention of the knight who had brought him there. The young paladin then turned around and asked him to calm down, assuring him that they would handle the situation soon. Suddenly the lich started smiling upon realizing that his master had recognized him, which left the paladin in shock, commenting to Relai that the demon was showing a bizarre intent. Unexpectedly, the lich swiftly passed through all the soldiers, saying he would stand by his master's side, which immediately worried Relai, who warned that the beast was heading toward Isaac. Rushing forward, the lich called the paladins idiots and asked how they dared to trap his master in that disgusting bubble, while the protagonist celebrated having caught the demon's attention as he couldn't let his mana source die. Then, Isaac asked the lich to break the barrier, and he immediately understood. Without hesitation, the dark being attacked the barrier, leaving the blonde paladin and Relai utterly terrified. But the protagonist, smiling, told the lich that he had done a good job but should stop causing trouble and go rest, leaving the beast confused. It didn't take long for the demon to start being consumed, wondering why, but soon the protagonist devoured him completely, leaving only his hand behind. The paladins were stunned, watching the scene, wondering if the boy had really turned the demon into a totem. Quickly, the blonde paladin started celebrating, emphasizing that the baby had transformed the demon into a totem in seconds, which was incredible, and commented that the boy must have used a sacred art that only saints and cardinals were capable of. Everyone celebrated, tossing him into the air, while Relai simply watched, and the protagonist reflected that he hadn't used any kind of sacred art, just magic. The seventh son of the family, feeling a bit tense, admitted that it really did seem like a sacred totem transformation art, and wondered how a child had used such an advanced sacred art, considering he hadn't sensed any divine power. But the blonde, excited, said that people tend to shine when in danger, explaining that when the demon charged at the young master, he must have felt threatened and focused entirely on the beast. Holding the protagonist in his arms, he affirmed once again that it looked like divine power and was convinced that the boy was the saint, though Relai remained unconvinced. However, he reflected that the paladin wasn't entirely wrong, because even if the boy wasn't the saint, he was undoubtedly special. Still, he couldn't understand why it had to be a boy, wondering if it was due to the Skeleton King's curse, the men of House Eshua. Suddenly someone interrupted his thoughts as a voice declared a decision. It was the blonde knight, stating that as the commander of the Azure Knights, he would protect the young master Isaac, because he was the hope of House Eshua. This left Relai momentarily frozen, but he soon smiled, saying that he finally understood and had been foolish. He then approached the protagonist to pick him up, concluding that worrying about the Skeleton King's curse had been a mistake. After all, that child could be their hope. Holding the protagonist in his arms, he said they would go home, and as the boy's uncle, he would teach him many things, pointing out that he had great potential and would grow into a fine paladin. Isaac smiled upon hearing that, but thought that he didn't even care about becoming a paladin. He just wanted to get his body back when he got home. Until he hears Relai saying that even if he is destined to live a short life, she will find a way to save him, which leaves him in shock. Noticing the protagonist's reaction as he starts to get agitated, Relai says that his name will be known throughout the continent and that she knew he would be happy with the news. Then she informs him that as soon as they get home, she will teach him how to curse the Skeleton King, which irritates the commander of the knights. Sometime later, upon arriving at the family mansion, observing the monuments and the entire structure of the place, the young master becomes furious and thinks to himself that those bastards enjoyed themselves while exterminating the demon race, questioning how much it must have cost. He remembers the demon race in misery and how he struggled to feed his people. Suddenly, Whisper appears, commenting that this place is paradise compared to their shitty castle, and that if they manage to sell some of the statues here, they could buy 10 brand new castles. This irritates Isaac, and he orders the creature to shut up. From the window, the protagonist notices that this is the Eshua mansion, the continent of exorcism's origin. Then, he asks to look through the window, and while watching the paladins train, he hears a man say that he will be like them when he grows up. Looking closer, the protagonist notices that the young ones are beating a puppet of the Skeleton King, and as they hit it, they insult the doll in every way, saying it deserves to be cut into pieces. That scene almost makes the protagonist have a heart attack, and while Relai smiles, he wonders what they are teaching those children. But he quickly calms down, thinking it doesn't matter, because ever since he entered the Holy Empire, he decided he would make the Emperor his little dog and rename this place to Isaac Empire. Whisper then asks if he, as the evil Skeleton King, will allow those children to hurt his feelings, which is shameful, but he simply ignores the little demon, telling him to shut up and keep watching. Whisper responds that fine, he will do as he wishes. Looking at the mansion building, the protagonist notices several shining spots and asks if those are all mana cores. Even Whisper comments that he has never seen so many cores and wonders how many demons they have already exterminated. It doesn't take long before the carriage stops, and the coachman announces their arrival. Quickly, Relai gets off with the protagonist in her arms and asks a servant to reorganize his room because Isaac will stay with him. The servant, with a trembling voice, apologizes, but says they were ordered to take the young master to the annex, which confuses the paladin, who questions what he is talking about. The servant then informs him that the fifth young master has ordered that Isaac is forbidden from entering the main house, leaving the protagonist equally confused. Relai becomes irritated and asks if they want to send the young master to that cursed place where people perish, and soon Isaac understands that this is a family dispute and that he should have noticed it, realizing that Relai is never home. The paladin comments that his older brother is always playing those senseless pranks, while the protagonist wonders why he should go to the annex when there is a giant mansion right there, until he hears Whisper saying that the mana cores are in the annex, surprising him. Then, Relai walks past the servant, saying he will not let his nephew stay in that cursed house. Next, he tells the protagonist that they will go to his room, and he himself will read sacred scripture stories to him every night about the battle of the saints against the Skeleton King. As soon as they finish reading the sacred scriptures, he will teach him how to recite an exorcism made especially for the Skeleton King. Upon hearing this, the protagonist becomes desperate, reflecting that it will only bring him bad memories, and that, by reciting an exorcism, Relai will eventually exorcise him. Suddenly, someone appears in front of the paladin, saying that he first brought that worm there and now is causing trouble. With a smile on his face, he informs that he sent the child to the annex and asks if, after so much time away, the first thing Relai does upon returning is challenge his older brother's orders. This man is the first son of the Eshua house, Goal. With those words, even the protagonist becomes apprehensive, and watching the two staring at each other, he thinks that this Goal is a jerk. The first son then tells Relai to let go of the boy, as he will send him to the annex. Relai retorts, asking if Goal is serious, emphasizing that the child is part of the direct family lineage. He questions again if Goal is really going to send the boy to the annex, which they use as a storage. Hearing the whole conversation, the protagonist thinks that this idiot really doesn't want him in the house. Suddenly, Goal starts trying to take the boy from Relai's arms, who argues that he will teach him to exorcise the Skeleton King in his own room, which makes Isaac desperately want to go to the annex after all. Goal mocks, saying that Relai brought something even more disgusting than the Skeleton King this time, and with an arrogant smile, asks if he really wants to talk about direct lineage. Meanwhile, the protagonist, staring at the arrogant young man, thinks that, even though he wants to go to the annex, he wonders how big of a jerk Goal can be. But he calms down, as he only wants to go to the annex and absorb all the mana cores he saw. Relai in turn questions if Goal really thinks he doesn't know the reason behind wanting to send the boy to the annex. He explains that Goal wants to label him as a cursed child and prevent him from entering the family's line of succession. This information leaves the protagonist even more confused, and, thinking about it, he reflects that this is a problem because he needs to suck everything the house has and become the saint. This way, he can become the Pope too, which is necessary for him to take revenge on the damned gods. Goal, with a smug smile, replies that he doesn't need to prevent anything because he heard that even demons come to take Isaac, so the boy is already cursed. But suddenly, the commander of the knights appears, saying that it is not quite like that, and informs that the young master has even exorcised a demon. With his hand on his chest, he emphasizes that the fact that demons are focusing on him proves that the boy really is special. One of the knights agrees, pointing out that Isaac really possesses the holy power of a saint. Goal then turns around and says that it is cute to see all of them irritated like that, trying to cover up that piece of trash. He tells everyone to shut up and states that, if the boy really is a saint, they should make him show his abilities. Immediately, Whispers appears, provoking the protagonist to show a meteor summoning, but Isaac tells him again to just shut up. The arrogant young man then turns to him and says that, if he is a saint, there is a challenge. Pointing to a dead tree, he asks Isaac to save the family symbol, as the family head loved that tree. Explaining, he says it is a divine tree that died after absorbing demonic energy, and if Isaac really has the power of a saint, he will be able to revive it easily. With a wicked smile, he says the boy will have no problems if he really is a saint, as everyone says. Relai asks if he is serious, while the protagonist, observing, thinks that Melissa worked so hard, but her children are all idiots, reflecting that the eldest son is missing, and the fifth is a jerk. Suddenly, he notices something and is completely stunned, while Whisper asks what happened. The protagonist grabs the creature and asks if it can't see, then throws it away, telling it to fetch something. Meanwhile, Relay tells Goal that no one has been able to save the tree in the last 70 years, and asks if he expects a child who can't even understand them to do it. Suddenly, they both notice something that shocks them. Looking ahead, Relay sees that, inexplicably, the divine tree has revived and looks beautiful. Even Goal is astonished, commenting that not even with purification arts had the tree come back to life. While the two are stunned, the protagonist smirks lightly and tells himself that it was no big deal. He simply saw that the tree was full of demon residue in its branches, so he removed it using the creature, which returns with a satisfied look, saying it ate all the mana as instructed. Moments later, the commander of the knights arrives, also surprised, and asks Relay how he revived the tree. He responds that he did nothing, which leaves the commander even more surprised, suspecting that it was the protagonist. But Isaac makes a face as if it was no big deal, thinking to himself that it was just mana. The commander becomes even more enchanted, concluding that it was indeed the young master. However, Goal says they must have gone crazy because no one managed to save the tree, so it definitely wasn't a child who did that. But everyone ignores him and starts tossing the protagonist into the air again, celebrating, commenting that he had already done the first exorcism and now performed the first purification. Meanwhile, Goal, frustrated, tries to argue that someone must have helped. He gets even angrier and accuses Relay, saying that he must have done something. Relay retorts, asking what he is talking about. Suddenly, Goal charges at him, furious, grabbing him by the collar and shouting that he got the power of the saint and is acting as if the boy did that. This leaves Relay even more confused, and he asks again what the hell Goal is talking about. Everyone begins to observe the argument, tense, and while Relay says that it's impossible to find the missing saint, the protagonist thinks it would be better if Melissa were educating her children instead of hunting monsters, because those two might destroy the house. Watching Goal, he wonders why that guy doesn't look anything like Melissa, while Relay looks exactly like her, only dressed as a man. At this, Whisper comments that they might be half-siblings, and Isaac, wide-eyed, says that, now that he thinks about it, Goal looks like the Pope. Back to the fight, Goal tells Relay to stop hiding and says he knows he brought the boy there to make him a candidate for sainthood, creating a shady scheme even knowing there's already a chosen one. This information makes the protagonist question if there's another candidate for sainthood in the house, and wonder who will be the idiot first son's protector. Whisper, jokingly, comments that the young master seems pretty relaxed for someone in the middle of that competition. But the protagonist retorts, saying that defeating the other candidate will be a piece of cake, considering an idiot is supporting him. Relay asks if Goal is suggesting that he should abandon the child, and emphasizes that he is their nephew, the son of his older brother, and has the right to be there. But the arrogant one says that the older brother is a deserter who ran away from home when they were in danger. Furious, Goal asks if it was the older brother who asked them to take care of Isaac, finally making the protagonist understand why Goal was treating him that way. With a smile on his face, he says it's fine. The boy could be the son of a saint, a mixed child brought from outside to become the saint, since his brother's wife is one. Then, in a dark tone, he asks if that child is really his brother's son, and if Melissa wanted to help, she would come. Suddenly, Relay loses his patience and lands a punch right in the middle of Goal's face. The young man with his face broken becomes enraged, while Relay argues that he deserved it after saying such an atrocity. All the paladins watch, incredulous at the scene, while the protagonist feels pleased, reflecting that brothers grow up and fight all the time, something he himself used as a lesson. Quickly, the paladins start running toward the fight to separate the two, and Isaac, sarcastically, says he's happy to see that family so united, as it will be easier to take everything they have this way. With a horrifying smile, he thinks he will destroy everything in that cursed house. This makes Whisper a little anxious, and he asks if, in case that house ends up being destroyed, the young master won't fall with it. Again, as always, the protagonist tells him to shut up. Sometime later, after all the chaos, the protagonist is sitting and begins to feel irritated. He is at the table, where family members are debating about having another boy living in the house, and he thinks that everyone in that house is a freak. One person at the table says that after taking that poor girl of unknown origin and turning her into a saint, he should be thankful instead of giving birth to a useless boy. Another person interrupts, saying that she no longer has the right to be a saint. Hearing all the conversation, Isaac gets even more irritated, thinking that they could at least speak one at a time. Suddenly a girl interrupts everyone, asking for silence. She is Henna, Elieshua's second wife, the head of the house. Henna says that a secondary family to theirs stated that they will take care of and raise the boy. Then, she questions Rely about why he brought the boy there. Observing her, Isaac notices that, just by looking at Henna's face, he can tell how much she hates him, so it was certainly her who sent him to the annex. Goal, with his broken face, slams his hand on the table and points at Henna, saying that his mother is asking a question as the head of the family and wonders why Rely isn't answering. With that, the protagonist finally discovers who the young jerk's mother is. Rely calmly responds that she's speaking as the head because his father left her in that position. Henna retorts, saying that his father left for a brief moment because of the noise with all those conversations about the saint candidate. Rely says that it's a shame because he wanted to deliver the news in person that the divine tree, which he loves so much, was saved by his grandson Isaac. This causes everyone at the table to stand up, completely shocked. Goal, irritated, argues that it was just a coincidence, because a child couldn't have done that, and the tree was only saved because the followers of House Eshua had been praying for a long time. An old woman agrees and points out that the head of the family was exhausted from searching for a solution to that problem, questioning how a child could have done that. Henna also agrees and says that, on top of that, there's no proof that it was the boy who did that. Another family member surprisingly also agrees, but points out that it's a blessing the divine tree was saved. Isaac, observing all of this, is incredulous and decides that he will give them proof. Quickly, he extends both hands and shocks everyone at the table as they notice a powerful energy beginning to surround him and form a crystal. Even the oldest members of the family are impressed, looking at the crystal and all the energy around Isaac, realizing that this is the energy of the divine tree. And someone says that apparently Isaac removed the mana that was corrupting the divine tree. Incredulous, the old woman asks how, as she was already aware of the mana in the divine tree, and questions if he is really saying that a newborn dealt with it. Another lady points out that this is the only explanation, emphasizing that the boy contained the mana and clearly materialized it before their eyes. A man agrees, saying that the exorcism art that saved the tree could not have been easy, and that it could have died if they had not been careful. For this reason, the head of the house used purification instead of exorcism to save it. Goal gets irritated by the comments and says that all of this is nonsense, pointing out that it would be impossible for that brat to possess such powers. But Rely counters, arguing that Isaac surely followed his instincts and exorcised the mana from the divine tree, making the protagonist proud of those words. The seventh son says that the milk drinker achieved in mere moments something that no one in the house had managed in 70 years, making Goal even more furious. He slams the table, telling the elders they cannot believe such an absurd story, questioning how a baby, who has not even spoken his first words, could use exorcism arts. He warns that House Eshua will become a global laughingstock if they allow these absurd stories to spread. Enraged, he tells everyone to look at the boy, pointing out that he does not resemble his older brother at all and betting that he does not have Eshua blood, probably being the son of some street beggar. Hearing those comments, the protagonist merely scratches his ear, showing immense boredom. Abruptly, Rely raises his voice, demanding the elders' attention and declaring that one day that child will become a saint. In fact, he may very well become the Pope in the future. The protagonist thinks his uncle is doing well until Rely unexpectedly lifts him up and says that one day Isaac will exterminate the king of skeletons, leaving the old man and woman in shock with those words. Meanwhile, Hannah thinks to herself that Rely is digging his own grave. Then, she says that if he is so sure about this, they will test the boy. With a sinister look, she asks for permission to use the Vault of Divine Artifacts. Sometime later in the northwest of the Holy Empire of Hela, in the Black Forest, a monster is eliminated with a single strike. A knight, surrounded by the corpses of other monsters, sheathes his sword, saying that this is a waste of time. Another warrior approaches, and, kneeling, salutes the lord of the house, who immediately asks what happened. The warrior reports that the vice leader requested permission to use the Vault of Divine Artifacts. The lord responds that, as he has already said, no one can have access to the sacred vision. The man retorts, saying that she does not desire the sacred vision, explaining that the leader's grandson saved the divine tree and therefore the vice leader requested access to determine whether the boy is truly the saint. Immediately the Lord turns and, approaching, asks why there is a saint in his house. This man is the head of House Eshua, Ile, who, with a serious expression, says he refuses the request for permission, pointing out that that place will annihilate anyone who is not a candidate for sainthood. Then, he asks the soldier to tell them not to engage in pointless conflicts. Suddenly, another person arrives and asks Eli to let them use the vault. The woman asks if the child's name is Isaac, and says that by saving the divine tree, the boy must be promising, questioning Ilay's opinion. This woman is Melissa Eshua, matriarch of the house and former saint. Suddenly the leader asks, if they open the vault, why not throw all the saint candidates in there? Hearing that, the soldier becomes frightened. Ilay continues, pointing out that the son of another house might take the best artifact from the vault. Melissa responds that she would prefer that to happen and that someone could try, as not even the greatest saints in history managed to take it. However, with it, they could even track down the Skeleton King and exterminate him once and for all. She adds that, in fact, they should reward whoever manages to bring it. Melissa asks the knight to spread the word that the child who brings the best artifact will receive a reward that not even the Pope could offer. Not only will they receive the saint's inheritance, passed down from generation to generation by the Eshua house, but she will also personally teach secret techniques, giving everything to the child who succeeds. The vault is the object where divine artifacts and secret techniques have been stored for thousands of years. For generations, the saint was responsible for guarding it, and because of this, the Eshua house was seen as its owner. Since only children under 10 years old could enter, the vault was used as the location for the first birthday ritual for saint candidates. This way, they could predict abilities based on the item the child brought from the vault during the ritual. However, it is a dangerous place, and even saint candidates can easily die inside. After years of deaths and losses beyond its doors, the vault was sealed. After the entire explanation, Whisper asks the protagonist if he will be able to take the saint's treasure and return safely. But Isaac retorts, asking why he is acting like a narrator. The creature then asks if he isn't excited, and he responds that, of course, he is, as they say the Skeleton King's body is in the vault. Noticing the protagonist's excitement, the commander picks him up from the crib and asks if he is thrilled, commenting that the matriarch opened the vault to all saint candidates, leaving the protagonist wondering about the word all. The commander then tosses the young boy into the air, saying that children from all 5 great houses will gather. Even the house of the dreadful Pope will be there, but he is sure the young master will win. With that, Whisper remarks that the event is bigger than expected. Meanwhile, Isaac reflects that this will be better since, if several children enter the vault, the observer's attention will be divided, making it much easier to retrieve the body. Suddenly, someone picks him up, warning that he should be careful, as the demons captured during the war are kept in the vault. The protagonist, however, remains calm, knowing that demons will never harm him. Even so, if they were captured, they must be rank 6 or lower, and as long as he uses the skill intimacy, everything will be fine. Until Relai, placing him in the crib, concludes the reasoning by saying that rank 8 demons are not easy enemies to deal with. This information shocks Isaac, who wonders how rank 8 demons managed to be captured. Then, the commander asks Relai if the rank 9 dragon wouldn't be harder to handle, and he replies that, considering the rank, it makes sense. Whisper says that this house is full of lunatics and wonders why on earth they would place a dragon in an area where they hold the first birthday ritual for babies. Even so, the young master's extensive knowledge of dragons should help him deal with them. But soon he notices that Isaac is completely panicked, sweating cold and thinking that dragons are dangerous in a completely different way, as he remembers frequently outwitting dragons. This makes Whisper question how many dragons he is talking about. The protagonist recalls that countless dragons were furious at him for being tricked, so much so that they constantly threatened him. Then, Isaac responds that there are about 70 dragons. A terrible thing, as they have fantastic memories, and if they perceive who he really is through his soul, he'll be screwed. Whisper jokingly says that this might be a great opportunity to switch masters, which irritates the protagonist, who says he heard that. Isaac thinks he has no choice, because with the vault full of rank 8 demons and rank 9 dragons, and with his current abilities, he can only defeat rank 6 enemies. So, to defeat them, he will need to infiltrate the annex where all the house's war spoils are kept and steal all their mana cores. Sometime later, at the family mansion, near a door, the protagonist approaches with a book in hand, accompanied by Whisper, who, noticing something, asks if everything is all right, as he looks like he's about to be exorcised. Terrified, Isaac reflects that once he figures out how to use sacred power, he will be able to learn sacred arts with ease. So, he hopes that happens soon, and wonders if he should use mind control to make them teach him. The observer says the master must be crazy, trying to use magic in the middle of the clergy, and questions if he wants to be accused of being a demon and destroy the entire Eshua family. The protagonist retorts, asking why he turned out like this after 150 years. He then tries to focus on the book, but, already rubbing his eyes from exhaustion, realizes that he can't understand it just through theory. Suddenly, someone picks him up saying he looks tired. It's Relai, who comments that he must have been through a lot that day. This makes the protagonist think that at his age, he really needs to sleep for 16 or more hours. Then, Relai takes him to the crib while the commander picks up the book he left on the floor. Suddenly, the seventh son extends his hand over the protagonist's head and casts a recovery spell on him, making him excited to finally see a sacred art. Quickly, he starts climbing the crib bars, mentally begging his uncle to show him some attack arts, while the observer tells him to stay quiet and warns that they need to go to the other building later, so they can't make those people stay there too late, which he promptly agrees with. With that, he lies back in the crib pretending to be asleep, while Whisper criticizes his cheap acting. It doesn't take long before the commander, with a delighted smile, says that the young master fell asleep so quickly, and Relai, equally dazzled, comments that he is an incredible child, simply perfect, which makes the observer think they're crazy for falling for such an act. While the protagonist pretends to sleep, the two comment that it's already late and they should leave since they have other things to do. But suddenly, the protagonist hears his uncle say that the totem is dangerous, so the commander should store it, which puts Isaac instantly on alert. Relai points out that this is the first totem Isaac made, so it should be kept in a safe place, and the commander agrees. After hearing all that, the protagonist starts crying, thinking that he needs to retrieve the item because he needs to extract mana from it. After they leave the room, the protagonist quickly gets up and says that, in that case, he will have to extract the entire mana core. He starts climbing the crib, and Whisper mocks the scene, asking if he plans to crawl all the way there because in that case, they would only arrive tomorrow. But he responds that he has a plan and asks the observer to open the door. The creature then starts moving toward the door, warning that it won't carry him under any circumstances, while the protagonist falls out of the crib like a potato. Unexpectedly, the observer informs that Relai locked the door, and the lock is on the outside. On top of that, it even has a sacred art on it. Hearing that, Isaac becomes even more frustrated, mentally cursing his uncle. He orders the observer to break it, but the little ghost responds that if he does that, they will think it's an attack and come running there. Isaac grows even more nervous and knocks on the door. Forcing it open, he thinks he will go crazy in there, and if he uses magic, things might get worse. Suddenly, someone tries to open the door from the outside and hits the protagonist's head hard. It's a child, who wonders what's going on until he opens the door and notices the protagonist lying on the floor. He says that he's just a baby who can't even walk. This boy is Gol's son, a candidate for the family saint. His name is Shuri, and he is 5 years old. Looking at Shuri, the protagonist wonders if that is his rival, while Whisper is outraged that the boy slammed the door in the young master's face. Looking irritated, Shuri thinks there is no way that baby could have made a totem, not even a genius like himself could do that. Then, he picks up the item, and extending his hand, begins to use a power that enchants the protagonist. Smiling, the boy says that he will be the one to become the saint. Shuri raises his hand and asks how that brat dares to steal his position, while the protagonist looks back and notices a toy lying on the floor. When the boy says he will be cursed, the protagonist uses his powers to throw the toy right in the middle of Shuri's forehead. With that, he thinks he has found a ride to get out of there. Gol's son becomes extremely irritated and asks the baby if he knows who he's messing with, but Isaac reflects that the kid is just like Gol, so he must be his son. Quickly, he picks up the toy again, remembering that he realized the boy was gathering sacred power to attack him. Then, he starts hitting Shuri incessantly, thinking that he deserved to get beaten up. Isaac enjoys it, and mentally orders the boy to become his ride. But Shuri, while taking the beating, begins to concentrate energy in his fist and creates a barrier that blocks the protagonist's attack, surprising him. He hears the boy ask if he's surprised and explain that he is the only one at his age who can use rank 3 defensive sacred arts. Shuri then brings his hands together and concentrates energy, saying that Isaac will be even more surprised. He creates 2 enormous energy spheres, a sacred attack art called Holy Light, and without wasting time, he launches them toward the protagonist, who, observing the attack, concludes that the boy is really good. Smiling, he thinks this will be a good meal, and manages to absorb all the energy from the Holy Light, shocking Shuri, who indignantly questions what kind of defensive sacred art is capable of doing that. After absorbing the attack, Isaac also raises his hands and suddenly creates countless sacred lights, thinking that he should thank Shuri for showing that art since Uncle Relai didn't explain how to use it, and he was curious. The brat, looking at that amount of lights, thinks it's impossible, and before he can do anything, the protagonist launches them in his direction. This terrifies the boy, leaving him paralyzed. Isaac simply watches the attack, accompanied by Whisper, who comments, emphasizing that it was cool, but questions whether it's okay to eliminate a direct family member. However, he replies that he won't get rid of the boy, and looking at Shuri, desperate on the ground, says that he didn't land a single attack. Immediately, the brat rushes at the protagonist, saying that even if he missed all the attacks, he shouldn't have done that, emphasizing that no matter how Isaac uses the sacred attack arts, he cannot defeat a saint candidate like him, until he starts to notice something strange and, sensing a dense dark energy, turns around, noticing the huge demon asking how he dares to attack his king. The demon nearly gives the boy a heart attack, leaving him completely terrified, crying like a newborn. Then, Isaac seizes the opportunity, climbing onto the creature's shoulder and asking what he is doing. With a wicked smile, he orders that little shit to carry him to the annex. Sometime later, Shuri Eshua, destined to be a saint, walks around the mansion, determined to leave that cursed house and become the Pope. Struggling to walk, he wonders why the hell he is being enslaved by that baby. The protagonist, mounted on the boy's shoulders with his rattle in hand, thinks he will finally reach the annex, while Shuri is furious about the situation, until suddenly, he sees that huge demon beside him, ordering him to hurry up or be cut into pieces. Observing the powerful demon, tears start to well up in the boy's eyes as he reflects that he needs to focus on surviving before wanting to become the Pope. Sometime later, he continues walking, carrying Isaac, who directs him which way to go using the rattle. The protagonist gets annoyed and mentally orders him to go the right way, while Shuri, exhausted, asks where that baby wants to go at this hour of the night. Suddenly, he stops and realizes he has arrived in front of the second annex, the haunted house. He wonders why that crazy baby brought him there, as the head of the family warned that no one should enter the annex due to the casualties that have already occurred there. Isaac and the observer are pleased, commenting that there are hundreds of manacores there, which would take decades of training to acquire. Quickly, the protagonist starts hitting the boy again, showing that he wants him to go inside, but Shuri says they can't go in because the adults, but he soon feels the demon sniffing at his neck, ordering him to shut up and hurry up. Without thinking twice, the boy enters the building and begins walking through the place. Looking around, Isaac notices that the environment is messier than he imagined, while Shuri carries him, almost scared out of his mind. Suddenly, the young master notices something, and, looking at a door, before he can finish his thought, the observer interrupts him, saying that the place is completely sealed and each door has a magic barrier, which discourages the protagonist. As expected, Shuri, completely exhausted, asks to go back since all the doors are locked and they won't get anything there. But out of nowhere, Isaac starts pulling his hair and tries to guide him somewhere else. Then, the boy goes to some paintings on the wall, which he says are the previous heads of the family, making him question if, out of everything there, he really wanted to see the heads of the family. He warns that Isaac shouldn't even think about it because that position will be his. As he speaks, the protagonist prepares his rattle and throws it, hitting one of the paintings dead on, making Shuri nearly have a heart attack from the fright. As the protagonist keeps throwing the object and breaking the other paintings, he screams that those are paintings of his ancestors, questioning what the boy is doing. But Isaac thinks that if they were so important, they should have placed magic barriers on the paintings too. Soon the observer notices that the barriers are disappearing and alerts the protagonist, who celebrates his success. Then, he unexpectedly jumps off Shuri's shoulders and starts rolling down the corridor, while the brat yells that he can't just go around breaking things like that. However, the protagonist simply ignores it and rolls toward a door, and upon arriving, he sees numerous manacores inside the room. Without hesitation, he begins to enter the place and asks Whisper to close the doors, while Shuri runs after him, yelling for him to wait and questioning what he is up to. Isaac, closing the door with a malevolent smile, thinks that a kid like that doesn't need to know. After closing the door, he sits down and begins to absorb all the mana. Meanwhile, outside, Shuri bangs on the door angrily, saying that if he doesn't come out, he will drag him out. He pounds desperately, saying he will tell the adults, and that they will kick him out of there, not noticing that someone is approaching. Behind the boy, several family members appear, and Relai calls his name. Immediately the boy turns around, and Relai asks what he is doing there. He responds that he is happy to see them and says that Isaac is a little monster. The old woman, irritated to see the boy there, questions why he is there, as they made it clear that entering the annex was forbidden, yet he still took Isaac there. This leaves the boy speechless, stunned. The old woman continues, saying that many people saw him carrying Isaac there and even noticed traces of attacks using sacred arts in his room. Then she asks if he did that, and Shuri, trying to explain himself, says no but soon admits that he did use some sacred arts and took the baby there. Relai then crouches down and places a hand on his shoulder, warning him that he crossed the line and that, even though he understands how he feels, he should not have done that to a baby. Having said that, he asks where Shuri locked Isaac, and the boy, already in tears, responds that he didn't lock him up, but rather that Isaac locked himself in. Suddenly, they hear knocking on the door, and Rely quickly approaches, asking if Isaac is inside, while the other family members whisper among themselves that Shuri really did lock him in. Suddenly, the door opens, leaving Rely in shock as he sees the young master crying uncontrollably. The scene also moves the old woman, who asks if he is okay and comments that he looks very frightened. Promptly, the uncle picks him up in his arms, saying he is glad he is safe, and informs the others that Isaac is in shock but seems fine. He looks coldly at Shuri and says that he should be ashamed of himself. The boy, in tears, tries to say it wasn't his fault, but Rely simply ignores him and begins to leave. Then, the protagonist appears with a wicked smile, mentally thanking him for the snack, which infuriates Shuri, who yells that he is a little pest, drawing the old woman's attention. Carrying Isaac, Rely notices that the boy is showing signs of hypertension and thinks it might be due to the cold, worrying since he is already experiencing health complications. But the protagonist, placing his hand on his chest, reflects that there was much more mana than he expected and that he managed to absorb the equivalent of a century. Finally, with all that mana, he can execute that plan. Rely notices the young master's expression and deduces that he must still be in shock. The next morning, inside the mansion, the protagonist is in his room, looking at a book accompanied by the observer when someone appears, saying they would like to introduce him to someone else. The uncle then introduces Ashley and says that she will take care of him from now on. The woman introduces herself as Ashley Larsh, saying she is a paladin of the family. She bows and promises to serve him until her last breath. With that, the protagonist remembers the previous night and wonders if they assigned someone to watch him because of that event. He then glares at Ashley and, making gestures with his arms, tries to say that he doesn't need her, leaving her and Rely confused. She approaches the protagonist, seemingly enchanted, and asks Rely if she can pinch his cheeks just once, which makes the protagonist wonder why there are so many lunatics in that family. The uncle then takes something out of his pocket and, showing a ring, says it's a gift. Isaac takes the ring and wonders if it was found on the ground, while the observer comments that he had heard the Eshua family's wealth was shaken, but it seems more serious than he imagined, asking if they consider that good enough for a birth ring. Suddenly, Ashley, looking at the item, questions whether that is really a treasure of the saint. Rely, stroking the protagonist's head, explains that he obtained it from the elders to give to Isaac, making the protagonist acknowledge that it really is a good item. He remembers that this is the ring the saint used when she fought him, an ancient ring that contains a small miracle from the gods. Observing the item more closely, he notices that it has an unbelievable amount of sacred power, but in its current state, he will only be able to use it once or twice. However, he will try to fix it. Sometime later, outside the mansion, Isaac notices something and, looking to the side, sees Goal leaning against a tree, staring at him. Noticing his furious gaze, he reflects that the face of that scoundrel reveals who he truly is, wondering how someone can look at their own nephew as if they were going to eliminate him. But suddenly, Goal starts walking toward him, smiling, and with an expression of extreme happiness, says that Isaac is always so kind, asking if he has already gotten used to the house, leaving the protagonist and the observer astonished. He becomes furious, thinking that guy is truly disgusting, while Whisper says that it seems Goal has finally gone insane. The first son, while appearing delighted, reflects that things are getting weird because he had broken the blessing device in the vault so Isaac wouldn't receive any, and now they gave the saint's treasure to the boy. He remembers the old woman giving the saint's treasure to Rely to deliver to the boy, arguing that since he couldn't receive a blessing, that would be fair. Then, he also asked for a gift for his son, but the old woman replied that Shuri had already received a blessing from Holy Faith, telling him to stop being greedy and leave. That left Goal seething with rage because he had planned to pretend to donate a treasure to Holy Faith and keep it for himself, and now the item was given to a baby who doesn't even know what it is. After recalling that, Goal tells Rely that he should give Isaac a real gift, not a piece of trash, which makes Rely question how he could call an item of the saint trash. The arrogant man then takes an item out of his pocket, saying that Isaac is his precious nephew, questioning again how Rely could give him junk that the boy wouldn't even be able to use. Then he displays a beautiful ring, explaining that it is an item that has received countless blessings from Holy Faith and saying that it should be stored in the vault as it would be much more useful, and not even Rely could get something like that for him. The seventh son becomes upset upon hearing that. Quickly, the protagonist starts moving toward the ring, which makes Goal smile and encourage him. But suddenly, the protagonist strikes him with an absurdly strong slap, making his uncle say he will keep the ring himself. Isaac then closes the box and throws it far away, telling himself that Gol should take that filthy thing and give it to the dogs. The box falls into the mansion's fountain, and Gol promptly orders the servants to fish out the ring. Noticing the protagonist's reaction, Rilai becomes confused, as that ring seems 1,000 times stronger than the one he had given. Observing the boy holding the item and smiling, he wonders why he chose the ring he had given him. It doesn't take long before he reaches out to pick up Isaac, calling him his precious nephew. Tossing him into the air along with Ashley, he says he will give him the best things in the future, while the servants and Gol desperately search for the other ring in the water. As he is thrown up, the protagonist remembers using magic to make the ring extremely heavy, making it almost impossible to find, while the observer comments on being impressed by his determination to never touch a rat's belongings. However, he is soon disappointed when Isaac asks him to retrieve the ring at midnight. Watching the fools desperately searching for it, he explains that he could sell it for a lot of money. Sometime later, slamming the table hard, Gol says that Isaac is a foolish baby and asks a paladin if he has any idea of the item's value. But he quickly calms down and says it's fine because in any case, the boy wouldn't be able to use the ancient ring properly. He explains to the paladin that it is a good item for someone who cannot use sacred arts, but activating it would be impossible since the ring needs to absorb sacred power equivalent to that of 20 people. Intrigued, he ponders about having around 10 people for the first birthday. The next day, on the first birthday, everyone was gathered at the mansion for the party. Looking out the window, Ashley says it's incredible to have 148 saint candidates and 4,000 servants and aristocrats. Smiling, she comments that apparently all the ducal and marquis houses are also present, and that she heard other countries sent their saint candidates, which is splendid. Meanwhile, the protagonist comments to the observer that people say saints are sent from the heavens, leading him to believe that the gods got lazy and started throwing them everywhere. The observer responds that it is certainly something they would do. Rilai comments that this is unexpected, as he thought everyone would assume it was a trap and not come. Suddenly, someone opens the door, saying there's no way they would think that. With a smile on his face, the man greets Rilai. This is the leader of one of the 3 best merchant guilds in the empire, and Rilai's childhood friend, Count Simon Aegis. The 7th son is surprised to see him there, and Simon comments that all the families in the empire are excited about the event, so he couldn't miss it. In a mocking tone, he says people heard that Eshua's weak men would be participating, so everyone came knowing it wouldn't be a trap, and since the family's matriarch set a reward, everyone became interested, including the Pope's house. Hearing this, Isaac becomes pensive. Rilai gets irritated by those words and questions what he is saying, arguing that there's no way the Pope's house would participate, but Simon replies that they would, and comments that the all-powerful royalty should not come to Eshua, because they say that everyone except the Barrett house is a commoner, and the royalty hates being around them. Someone outside starts approaching the door and hears Simon saying that his son, Amon, is also a saint candidate, and that, since Eshua is the host, the Pope's family should not interfere. Rilai warns him to watch his tongue for that reason, but the Count ignores him and says they just need to bring something better than those snobbish popes who always keep their noses up as if smelling something rotten. After these words, everyone is shocked when they realize the door has opened, and someone says that there is a saying that nothing is more dangerous than a vulgar friend. It is the head of the Barrett family, Hare, who emphasizes that old sayings are never wrong. Seeing Hare approaching, Simon panics, while Rilai, also frightened, greets him. The cardinal comments that the weak boy from Eshua is hosting the first anniversary and says he prays that he can bring something from the vault to save the family's reputation. With a conceited look, he points out that he was curious to see the child from the Eshua family who is a saint candidate, but still, he did not find the boy. Noticing that the protagonist is in Ashley's arms, he says this is a good opportunity and prays that the saint candidate will carry the name Eshua. Upon hearing those words, Rilai begins to sweat coldly, wondering if he has fallen into a holy faith trap, as he finds it strange that the number of saint candidates increased from 25 to 148 in the last week, and there should be no other explanation. The holy faith must have ignored all the unqualified candidates. Even though everyone wants their child to be a saint candidate, if those children are thrown into the vault, they will quickly deal with the weakest competitor, and with that, they can take advantage of the chaos to execute a sinister plan. This means Isaac is in danger. The men born in Eshua, despite possessing an incredible appearance and the family's reputation, are useless. However, those who want to have Eshua's superior blood and those who want to gain the favor of the Pope, who hates the House of Saints, see a man from Eshua as a tempting prey. A pope, holding a vial in his hand, asks a boy to play with the Eshua child and, handing him the vial, says that the boy does not need to lose his life, only to be rendered incapable of doing anything. The Pope instructs the boy to mix the drugs into the Eshua boy's water and use a sacred poison to show him the harsh reality of this world and ensure he never becomes a saint. Back to the present, several boys are perplexed to see that Isaac had drunk many of those poisoned vials and seemed to be enjoying it. Noticing the protagonist with a bizarre expression, one of the candidates says he is very scared, while another wonders how many bottles he has already drunk. It doesn't take long before the protagonist, after finishing another bottle, throws it at one of the boys' heads, signaling that he wants more. Isaac reflects that such a tiny amount of poison will be useless. Then he starts shaking one of the bottles, while the boy who was hit begins to cry, saying he wants to go home. One of the candidates asks another what is happening, as Isaac should have diarrhea by now, and the other candidate wonders if they gave him the wrong bottle. Shuri is also in disbelief, wondering why Isaac is drinking so much poison. Then he begins approaching the protagonist, reflecting that he cannot tarnish the family's name and wondering if that baby does not realize the water is poisoned. He takes the bottles from the protagonist's hands, asking if he is possessed, and offers another bottle, saying that he could use it. But the young master throws the bottle right in the middle of Shuri's face and starts pulling another candidate's pants, showing that he wants more poison, while Shuri nearly loses consciousness from the bottle strike to his face. Then, the frightened boy assumes that the water he has contains sacred poison and offers it, but another candidate asks if he has lost his mind, as drinking it would make him meet Jesus up close. Hearing this, the protagonist becomes alert. Immediately he jumps up, his eyes shining, and makes sounds asking for the bottle. Isaac then creates immense chaos in the hall, while one boy comments that he must have high poison immunity, and another says he has heard that by training sacred power, one can reach a level where no poison has any effect. While the terrified candidates try to understand how Isaac is still alive and asking for more poison, Shuri, sitting in a corner, wonders what they are talking about. Suddenly, he notices someone approaching, and a boy appears, questioning whether Isaac might be sacrificing himself. Immediately, Shuri stands up, and upon recognizing him as Kina Barrett, he wonders what he is doing there, as he didn't know the House of the Pope would also be present. This is Kina Barrett, a direct grandson of the House of the Pope. Quickly, other candidates notice his arrival and are surprised, commenting that he will certainly win the competition. Meanwhile, sitting on the back of the boy who gave him the bottle, Isaac drinks the poison calmly. Looking at Kina, he reflects that this is the one internally chosen to be the saint, and wonders if the Barrett house truly produced someone with that hair color because, no matter how much he thinks, all of them have brown hair. Kina, with a smile, says that it's not strange for someone like him to be there, and emphasizes that the Pope is the leader of all clergy. And besides, they are on a property of the House of the Pope. That is why he is there to take what is rightfully his. Observing the scene, the protagonist thinks that, speaking in that manner, it's clear that he belongs to the House of the Pope. And considering his divine power, he must have already surpassed even the bishops, which is probably why he is at the top of the candidate list. Kina then says they are trying to make him the villain of the story and questions whether everyone there is even a candidate for sainthood. He declares that they are all idiots and asks what they will gain from bothering that young child, as there is no way that baby can control his immunity to poison. Kina crouches in front of the protagonist and says that the power of a saint must be protecting him. The protagonist, observing him, thinks that apparently being an idiot is part of that family's genetics. The boy begins to use magic in his hands and says he will heal him, making the other candidates curious and wonder if he really has the power to cure poisoning. Admiring the amount of divine power he already possesses, Isaac just watches as he begins to heal him and reflects that Kina might be using this to draw attention, which he considers clever. Suddenly, the protagonist delivers a strong slap to the boy's face. Immediately, one of the candidates points at Isaac and asks if his divine power has disappeared. Quickly, Kina turns around, and upon looking at the protagonist, he realizes that his divine power has been absorbed, which makes him tremble and wonder if that child is stronger than him, leaving him furious. But Isaac, grabbing a small bottle, is bothered by the way the boy is looking at him and tries to throw it at Kina, but at the last second, he is stopped by Shuri. That action impresses Kina, who notices that the boy protected the baby because they are from the same family, while the other candidates become irritated that the protagonist hit the person who tried to heal him and question if that baby thinks he can stand against the House of the Pope. Shuri, holding the protagonist, reflects that if it weren't for him, everyone there would have taken a bottle to the head. Kina then says that it's all right because Isaac's reaction must have been out of surprise. He starts to leave and wishes good luck to the children of Eshua, commenting that they should grab some toys to save the family's reputation, irritating the protagonist and his cousin. Before leaving, Kina turns around and says that, just to be clear, the great treasure will be his, emphasizing that the Eshua will never get close to the Skeleton King's body. Shuri watches the arrogant boy leave, saying that he's annoying and wondering why he even came there, without noticing that he's being held by his shirt. That is until the protagonist starts shouting, trying to ask what that white-haired idiot had just said. He begins shaking Shuri up and down, questioning what Kina said about the Skeleton King's body, while Shuri, completely confused, asks why he's doing that, until he finally mentions that the matriarch said whoever possesses the Skeleton King's body will gain a special technique. Immediately, Isaac lets go of him. Worried, he wonders what kind of game Melissa is playing using his body. Sometime later, after drinking many bottles of poisoned water, the protagonist starts reflecting that he spent hundreds of years cultivating mana in his old body, and reaching rank 10 would be a piece of cake if he could get his hands on it. But he doesn't know how he'll do that when all the other children are trying as well. With that, he thinks it doesn't matter, because he'll take down anyone who gets in his way. Suddenly, he hears someone calling for everyone to gather, and a woman appears, announcing that they'll be leaving soon so they should listen carefully. She explains that this is a sacred place that holds a treasure from all the previous saints. Hearing that, the protagonist feels bored, thinking that this talk will take forever. So he starts crawling, saying to himself that he'll go first, but his cousin quickly notices and asks where he's going. Suddenly, dust starts rising everywhere, making Shuri cover his eyes. Soon, everyone witnesses a shocking scene as Isaac moves rapidly, using a sacred art he learned called quick steps. The old woman yells that Isaac can't go in there because it's a forbidden area, and warns that if he takes that path, the traps will be activated throughout the entire room, sending the other candidates into a panic. Quickly, they all start running toward the protagonist, saying they'll stop that brat. Meanwhile, in the mansion hall, Ashley tells Relai that she hopes the young master is all right. It doesn't take long before a servant, using an ability that creates a screen, says he managed to connect to the treasure room. He explains that with this ability, they can watch live what's happening with the child in third place. Soon, he announces that the first chamber's door has been opened and that the candidates have already entered, making Relai uneasy. Then he announces that third place currently belongs to Amon Aegis, making the boy's father celebrate as if he had just scored a goal in a World Cup final. The servant then reports that second place goes to Shuri Eshua, immediately catching Goal's attention, who, though dissatisfied, feels proud of his son. The servant prepares to announce first place and reveals that Isaac is in the lead, leaving Relai and Ashley completely baffled. Meanwhile, in the treasure room, the protagonist runs as if there's no tomorrow, while the old woman, chasing after him, desperately begs him not to go that way until she steps on a trap that instantly fries her, leaving Shuri even more worried. After some time running, most of the children fall into the traps and start screaming for their mothers, begging to get out of there, while Shuri remains focused, chasing after the protagonist. He starts yelling, calling Isaac crazy and warning that he is making a mess. He argues that the treasure trials are already difficult enough, and now they even have to avoid those traps because of him. But Isaac ignores him and keeps running. Moments later, he reaches another gate, and it is announced that the entrance to the second chamber has been opened and that the second round of traps will be activated. Meanwhile, Shuri continues shouting, trying to warn him that this is the wrong path. Suddenly, the observer appears, saying that Isaac did a good job, and informing him that thanks to the mana cores he absorbed in the annex, he managed to rank up. He responds that this is great because now he can push himself even further. Then, the protagonist orders Whisper to grab him, which Whisper immediately obeys. As he heads toward the children, one of them comments that they didn't know it would be this difficult, and another says that's why the saints are so strong, until a boy notices something strange and, pointing at Shuri, asks if that isn't the representative of the Eshua. Another candidate confirms and tries to remember his name, while another questions how he is able to fly, and one of them replies that his family must have taught him, commenting that it's unfair. While the boys talk, a tear rolls down Shuri's face until the observer, humming, grabs him by the waist. He says he is flying against his will, begging to be put down. It doesn't take long before Whisper throws the boy to the ground near the protagonist, saying he has rescued the informant. Annoyed, Shuri tells him to stop that and says that somehow he managed to get through the first chamber of the candidate selection, but in the second, he could die if he's not careful, explaining that it was designed to teach the saints to overcome their fears and choose the right path. But before he could finish his sentence, the protagonist triggers another trap, frying his cousin, and says he was annoying. Looking at the charred boy on the ground, Isaac says he doesn't care and just asks him to explain what the second chamber is like. Shuri then explains that upon entering the second chamber, he must not attack the enemies, no matter what happens, and asks if he understands. But that only leaves Isaac more confused, and he asks who the enemies are and why he can't attack them. His cousin then replies that it is the only way to get through the second chamber, and no matter what happens, he needs to wait 3 minutes until they disappear. Then, he asks again if Isaac understands, because otherwise, they're screwed. With that, the protagonist reflects that they are trying to test their patience, something cliché. Getting up after the shock, Shuri warns that some people have already lost their lives inside, and the protagonist, now crawling, says it will be a walk in the park because waiting 3 minutes will be no big deal. Then, he begins to open the door, and a voice says, "Welcome to the Chamber of Tranquility. Patience is a virtue, and reasoning is cold. Do not be swayed and maintain your composure, and your patience will lead you to the light." Meanwhile, still in the first chamber, Kina continues advancing with other candidates, and one of them asks if they will be okay, pointing out that they are in last place. He replies that they don't need to rush and end up taking unnecessary risks. They just need to let the meat shields go first. Kina also asks if they have already forgotten that an 8th-rank demon guards the entrance to the second chamber, as he is sure that those who went ahead must have been defeated by it. Then he points forward, and seeing a radiant light being emitted, the descendant of the Pope warns that the challenge is about to begin. Meanwhile, upon opening the door to the second chamber, the protagonist and his cousin are shocked to see that the voice, smiling, belonged to a woman who continued to say, "Your patience will lead you to the light." Before she could say anything else, the protagonist activates a trap, instantly frying the blonde, leaving his cousin in shock. Remembering Isaac saying that waiting 3 minutes wouldn't be a big deal, Shuri is inconsolable, crying and shouting that he was an idiot. The protagonist tries to argue, saying he couldn't hold back upon seeing that witch in front of him, while the observer comments that he lasted 3 seconds, which was far more than expected. Moments later, a voice announces that they have failed, and that those who cannot be patient must face divine punishment. Suddenly, a massive monster appears before the boys. Immediately, the protagonist begins concentrating energy in one hand, while Shuri, terrified, says this will be the end of their lives. But Isaac quickly prepares to attack the monster and unleashes his power, striking the creature directly, leaving his cousin in disbelief. Looking at the hole in the monster's chest and at Isaac, Shuri wonders how he managed to do something like that. After the creature completely collapses, the protagonist questions whether it was really rank 8, and deduces that the golem was created by one of his subordinates, a member of the 14 elite demons, the strongest subordinates he trained as the Skeleton King, and that this magic belongs to them. This makes him wonder whether the demon is acting beneath House Eshua, or if it has something to do with the presence of his body. He then starts crawling, determined to investigate further, while his cousin asks where he is going this time. Out of nowhere, they hear a voice saying that he never imagined the Eshua boys would be so useful. Emerging from a bush, a red-haired boy points at the two cousins and tells the others that he had told them the boy from that family would know the way through. His name is Nigel Sephet, from the Red Faith of the 5 Great Faiths, the 3rd son of the Duke House Sephet. He thanks them for defeating the gatekeeper and orders them to step aside, as he and his group will enter the second chamber first. One of the candidates with him comments that they suffered a lot because of that baby, and another agrees, saying that the Eshua planned to enter first and set up several traps again. Observing those candidates, Isaac is surprised that so many survivors are still left. Nigel then points at Shuri and says he didn't know House Eshua was so cowardly, commenting that he could bet Shuri was involved as well. This leaves him completely confused. While the protagonist enjoys the situation, Shuri swears by all that is sacred that he wasn't working with Isaac, but Nigel simply ignores him. Squatting in front of the protagonist, he asks the other candidates if they also saw that baby avoiding all the traps, questioning whether that makes any sense, until he immediately notices the ring the protagonist had obtained and, without hesitation, grabs the artifact, commenting that it must have something to do with the ring. Holding the object in his hands, he tells everyone that they will be able to avoid all the traps with it, while Shuri reflects that he has crossed the line. Looking at his cousin, he wonders why Isaac is so calm about the situation, which scares him because Isaac would never let someone steal from him without a fight. Nigel and his group then begin heading toward the second chamber, saying they no longer need the Eshua, and commenting that the Skeleton King's corpse, something not even the ancient saints managed to retrieve, will belong to House Sephet of the Red Faith. He himself, Nigel Sephet, will recover it, until suddenly, a massive explosion occurs in the second chamber. Hearing the desperate screams of the candidates inside, Shuri realizes that his cousin Isaac lured those boys on purpose. After the smoke clears, Shuri enters the second chamber carrying the protagonist, walking past the bodies of the children who fell into the trap. The protagonist, observing Nigel's body, reflects that now all the mines and traps in the second chamber have been deactivated, and thanks the redhead for his sacrifice. But looking back, he feels uneasy because 3 boys are walking behind them, making him question why they are still following them. One of the candidates says he is sure that Isaac possesses divine energy, and another agrees, emphasizing that he is from the House of Saints, and that Nigel was foolish because that ring seemed to be just an antique. With that, Whisper says they have discovered the greatness of the Grand Master, which irritates the protagonist, who responds that he does not need their reverence. Meanwhile, Shuri thinks to himself that those poor boys should run away because the monster he is carrying is more terrifying than any demon. Suddenly, someone appears, saying that if there really is a saint among them, he believes it would be someone like Isaac. The boy then introduces himself, saying he is Paris Julius, the second prince of the kingdom of Julius, and that it is a pleasure to meet the youngest north of House Eshua. Hearing that, the other candidates start whispering, commenting that Julius is the kingdom east of Hela and that they have heard the prince received a divine blessing. Paying attention to the conversation, Isaac thinks that this boy might be useful. Suddenly, his cousin calls him and stops walking, warning that they have reached the gate of the third chamber. Immediately, 2 energy spheres on the pillars begin to glow and the gatekeepers start emerging from them. Then, a voice announces, "Welcome, candidates. The third chamber is the chamber of contemplation. Show your courage and determination." While Shuri becomes worried, the other candidates celebrate having reached the third chamber. The voice continues, saying, "The test here is simple. Defeat them and claim your honor." With that, the candidates wonder if, to demonstrate courage, they will need to fight the gatekeepers. Isaac, watching closely, notices something and, with a smile, says, "This will be fun." Quickly, he points at a black-haired boy, who becomes confused. This makes Shuri understand what he is doing, reflecting that Isaac is right. The gatekeepers are lying. The first chamber was the chamber of selection, and Isaac rushed in recklessly. The second was the chamber of tranquility, and he did not restrain himself. So, in the third chamber, the word contemplation is just a hint. They just need to remember what happened in the previous 2 chambers. Therefore, they must not attack them. But out of nowhere, the protagonist asks the other candidates to step back, once again leaving his cousin confused and wondering why he is helping the others. This makes him think that even if he is the devil himself, Isaac still has Eshua blood, the blood of the House of Saints. Then, he deduces that Isaac must have inherited the saint's virtue, even if only a little. Without noticing that the protagonist is concentrating energy in his hand, Shuri believes he misjudged his cousin and is certain that he is like the saint and will show the others the right path. Suddenly, Isaac attacks one of the gatekeepers, leaving him more lost than an olive in a toothless mouth. Upon receiving the attack, the gatekeeper grips his spear firmly and says that Isaac has failed, immediately counterattacking and generating an explosion that sends the other candidates flying. While the 2 distant cousins remain completely safe, they hear the cries for help. Looking up, Shuri thinks his cousin is truly a completely insane devil. Meanwhile, Isaac, with a malevolent smile, feels that this is a familiar sight, as the 2 gatekeepers are lying puppets, marionettes created with the magic of the 14 elite demons. Smiling, they call the candidates fools, saying that saints cannot trust others' words so easily. This excites the protagonist, who says they should teach those kids the bitterness of life. Without wasting time, the gatekeepers begin to attack. The other candidates, trembling with fear and crying, ask where the Eshua are, since they were just there, while the 2 cousins watch the massacre using rank 6 sacred art, invisibility. Paris, who was also invisible, observes them, while the protagonist reflects that this is a blessing an uncle taught them to use in emergencies, and Shuri used it at the perfect moment. Feeling close, he thanks him for making him invisible too, but Isaac says whatever, and tosses his ring to the boy, leaving him confused. The boy grabs the ring and asks if he gave it because he wasn't used to fighting demons. He then starts putting on the ring, thanking him and saying he won't forget this, but as soon as he puts it on, he immediately feels terrible pain and starts to become visible. With that, Whisper appears, saying he is proud of his master, while the protagonist, smiling, explains that the prince had the most divine power there. Watching Isaac's malevolent laughter, Shuri wonders where his uncle found that monster. Meanwhile, the boys under attack start organizing, and one of them asks if anyone knows how to use a sacred defense art. Quickly, one of them creates a shield, while another begins preparing an attack, but the gatekeepers keep attacking, telling them to accept the punishment. Swiftly, the shielded boy tells the other to attack, and the blonde, ready to unleash his power, suddenly falls to the ground, surprising his companion, who turns around and asks what happened. He doesn't notice the ring approaching and keeps trying to understand what's going on until suddenly, he also starts feeling something and falls to his knees, even confusing one of the gatekeepers, who doesn't understand what is happening. Immediately, he begins searching for the other candidates who haven't fallen. Meanwhile, Whisper, carrying the ring, informs Isaac that they have absorbed the divine power of everyone on that side, and he replies that they should now move to the other. As they go, Whisper is already preparing to attack 2 more boys. Quickly, he absorbs the divine power of one, surprising the other boy and the gatekeeper, and Isaac reflects that they should be grateful for this, since those lying puppets don't attack those who are down, so it's better for him to absorb everyone's divine power and leave them unconscious before they get hurt fighting. An observer warns that they are almost done when he notices something and wonders what that enormous sphere of energy is. It doesn't take long before the energy starts spreading through the room until, suddenly, someone appears and kicks the observer away. Looking at the 2 cousins, Kina says he finally found Isaac, while Isaac thinks to himself, wondering where that boy had been. Shuri reflects that he knew Kina was called a genius, but he didn't expect him to be able to summon a sacred spirit at his age. Kina must have been surprised that someone else was capable of defeating a demon, and questions whether they had led all the others into a trap just like they did in the first chamber, because if that's the case, suddenly, 2 candidates appear, and the blonde one says no, explaining that the baby did that trying to help them pass the challenge, and the other adds that Isaac saved them. This makes Whisper question if this is what they call post-shock syndrome, and the protagonist replies that they must have hit their heads. Kina questions whether he really saved them, asking if they aren't ashamed to be called saint candidates when they had to be saved by a brat. This outrages one of the boys, who states that Kina was behind them and did nothing while they went through all the traps. Soon, other candidates support him, saying that Isaac is the best person to be called a saint, and that they will tell the others that Kina has done nothing so far. Observing the scene, Shuri reflects that everyone is being deceived and hasn't realized that damn kid has been draining their power, while the boy continues saying that if it weren't for the Eshua, they would all be screwed. But suddenly, they notice something that frightens them. A huge sphere of energy begins to rise, making them wonder if they have finally managed to pass the second chamber. The sphere of energy then congratulates them for completing the second chamber and says it is the guardian of the last treasure. It then asks them to choose whether they want to take a treasure now and finish the test or face the challenge of the third chamber. One of the boys immediately says it's better to choose, but the guardian interrupts him, warning that they should answer carefully and asking again if they want to take the treasure and finish the test or face the challenge of the third chamber. He explains that if they complete the challenge, they will discover what the third chamber's treasure is, but if they fail, they will lose their lives. The candidates begin to panic, while Whisper says he feels a different mana in the Guardian's voice, which the protagonist confirms, pointing out that he is a dragon and that it has been a long time since he last saw one. This makes him think that they really could all end up in a grave in this challenge. The candidate in black says that even so, he wants to enter the third chamber because getting this far was too hard to give up now, and another agrees, stating that he wants to take the third chamber's treasure and become a saint. Soon, all the candidates declare their desire to enter. With that, the Guardian reaffirms the risk of the challenge and says that it's fine, they may enter the third chamber. Immediately, they all begin to feel a powerful pressure that terrifies them, while the protagonist and Whisper get excited. The Guardian then announces that those who came this far to become saints must face the challenge, and at that moment, the gate explodes. This makes the candidates fear what lies ahead, while Isaac appears excited. Then, it is announced that the final challenge will be very simple. They need to wake up God. The candidates are confused as they look at the statue, and one of them states that it is a statue of the cardinal. The Guardian then asks them to show their respect to God, saying that only those who demonstrate their faith before God will be able to enter the third chamber. With this, the candidates wonder if they simply need to kneel and pray in front of the statue, questioning whether it is too simple. Meanwhile, the protagonist, extremely irritated, asks if he really has to kneel before that bastard who made a fool of him for hundreds of years. The boy in black steps forward, saying that they just need to pray to the supreme God. He kneels before the statue and says that the Lord is worthy of all glory and honor, and his dear servant adores him. Instantly, the Guardian congratulates him and says that he may proceed. This makes him happy, while the other boys confirm that they really just need to pray. Suddenly, Isaac jumps off Shuri's shoulders, and when he tells the protagonist that they will need to pray, he takes a kick to the shin from Isaac, who, furious, asks if he looks like a lunatic. Shuri falls to the ground in Neymar's style, while the protagonist notices that someone has arrived in front of him. Then, he hears Kina saying that prayer is something taught by the holy faith. Kina kneels and asks everyone to pay attention. He explains that this is the proper way to worship the supreme God, and the boys quickly say that they would like to do it too. Promptly, everyone begins to pray, saying that the Lord is worthy of all glory and honor, but one of them remains standing, paralyzed. Soon, the guardian notices and asks if he is going to give up and choose death, which the boy quickly denies before starting to pray as well. Suddenly, the guardian notices something and, looking at the protagonist, asks why he is not kneeling. Isaac replies that not even if he were crazy would he kneel. This surprises the other candidates, who question why he is doing that, and whether it is really true that the MANHUA house is losing its faith. Meanwhile, Shuri mentally begs that the wicked brat does not tarnish the family name and starts praying. Kina, observing, reflects that all of this will be recorded and wonders if Isaac wants to be disqualified as a candidate, because no matter how talented he is, without faith, he will get nowhere. Then, he concludes that Isaac is harming himself for nothing. The guardian states that the holy child is acting disrespectfully, and the protagonist asks what the problem is, saying he would rather lose his life than kneel before that thing. The guardian remains silent, but suddenly, Isaac begins to feel something, and a sinister energy starts emanating from the statue, which declares that those who disrespect it will be killed. This enrages the protagonist even more, who, preparing an attack, says he will destroy that stupid statue, even as the observer warns that it is dangerous. Isaac continues to focus his power, but suddenly, the statue says that it is incredible, surprising the protagonist, who is already preparing his attack. The guardian then announces that the baby candidate has passed and may enter the third chamber. This leaves everyone in disbelief, especially Kina, who, pointing at the protagonist, questions the guardian's words about needing to show faith to pass, asking how the baby could pass without praying. The guardian responds that he is the only one with the right to enter the third chamber because he demonstrated his true faith in God, leaving the protagonist speechless. The statue asks if they still do not understand, emphasizing that they did not kneel for God, but for a statue, questioning whether their faith is meant to bow before a material idol. This makes Shuri reflect that, even in the form of their God, a statue is still a material idol, and they have fallen into a trap. The candidates feel disappointed, and one of them comments that the statue has the image of their God, just like in the paintings. But another responds that the sacred scriptures say they must not worship statues. The guardian then tells the candidates to look at the baby, emphasizing that even in the face of death, he did not lose faith, and only he has the right to enter the third chamber. Hearing this, Whisper questions Isaac about the meaning of faith, but excited to enter the third chamber, he just tells the little ghost to shut up. Kina is furious with the situation and says that this is unacceptable. He begins walking toward the statue, saying that the baby cannot even speak properly, so there is no way to claim that he refused to kneel because of his faith. Whisper comments that Kina is saying that out of anger, but that doesn't mean he is wrong. Irritated, Kina keeps questioning, if Isaac truly has so much faith, why does he still not have a stigma? The stigma is a mark that appears on the body due to divine powers. Hearing that, the protagonist feels confused, and soon everyone starts whispering, questioning how a saint candidate does not have a stigma. Realizing that he managed to create chaos, Kina reflects that, out of all the candidates, that baby is the only one without a stigma, which is something impossible for a saint. Then, the guardian explains that he is a saint candidate without a stigma because he is a baby, which surprises everyone. Moving, he emphasizes that babies do not receive stigmas so early. This enrages Kina even more, who shouts, pointing out that it makes no sense, and besides that, questions whether the baby could move the whole time. Scratching his nose, the guardian responds that he is sure babies do not need to have a stigma so soon. With that, all the other candidates start asking to enter as well, because if even a child without a stigma can enter, then they can too. But the statue retorts, saying they should know that a stigma does not appear just because they are good or something like that. Even so, he asks if they all really want to enter the third chamber, and everyone promptly confirms. Then he says that if they all want to, they are free to do so, surprising and exciting the candidates, except for Shuri, who becomes suspicious of how easily he allowed it. It doesn't take long before the guardian says that if they truly want to fly into the flames like flies, then they may enter. With that, the gate begins to open, and a powerful negative energy surges, making all the candidates feel sick under an overwhelming pressure. The guardian then asks if they are feeling the demonic energy from the Skeleton King's body, emphasizing that they do not recognize their place and that he had planned to spare the weak who could not withstand that energy. But this excites the protagonist, and with a psychotic gaze, he stares at the third chamber, thinking that he will finally reclaim his body. Anxious, he reflects that he never imagined he would see himself again after self-destructing in the divine realm and starts drooling, feeling the amount of mana the place is exuding. The guardian asks the other children to pay attention to how Isaac proves his faith and to notice the courageous expression of a warrior. The other candidates, watching with their mouths agape, wonder what the hell that statue is talking about. The guardian states that it is not too late yet and that if they are not warriors capable of smiling while facing death like him, they should leave. If they turn back now, he will allow them to take a treasure from the second chamber. Scared out of his mind, Shuri wonders how they could possibly smile in the face of that demonic energy. Meanwhile, other boys are crying in fear, and the blonde one says they should turn back before they end up going to live with God. Another points out that they can still choose a good item in the second chamber. But Kina, bravely, says he doesn't want any treasure from the second chamber and that everyone there will enter the third one. With determination in his eyes, he requests that all the traps in the next chamber ahead be activated, causing the others to question if he has lost his mind and the guardian to ask if he really desires that. He argues that no saint has ever managed to obtain the Skeleton King's body until now, not even Saint Melissa, the genius. The guardian then says that he seems to know something about the chamber, while Kina reflects that Melissa would never let a child lose their life, so she must have prepared something to help them survive. With that, she states that she doesn't want the others to think he chose the easier path, and asks for it to be as difficult as possible because only then will they surpass the other saints. Hearing this, the protagonist thinks he must be under the influence of some dubious substance. The guardian says that if that is what he desires, so be it, as this way it will be easier to find the true saint among the candidates. Immediately, he begins to emanate even more demonic energy, making one of the candidates say that Kina should go in there alone and question why he dragged them into this. Even so, they move toward the chamber, and upon entering they feel the energy suppressing them even more, with many unable to remain standing, except for the protagonist, who, excited, finds the place similar to the demon realm. The observer calls for him and asks him to look at something, showing him a skeletal arm embedded in a rock, which he confirms to be his master's body. This makes the protagonist happier than I am when opening a beer, and he says it is beautiful, thinking that the body must have also absorbed the power of the third chamber. Soon the other candidates notice the body, making him question whether all that demonic energy is coming from just the hand. Meanwhile, Isaac reflects that it is not from the hand but only from the pinky, and wonders if everything there is a replica and that the only real fragment is that one. Suddenly, more pressure begins to fill the place, and a gigantic demon emerges from the Skeleton King's hand. The children panic, and one of them asks if the guardian of the second chamber wasn't the only one. The guardian responds by asking if they had not requested to make it more difficult. Meanwhile, the protagonist notices something that intrigues him, but the demon quickly lands on the ground and, furious, roars, questioning how they dare to covet the king's body. The child in black points at Kina and says it is all his fault, asking what he will do. Kina asks them to trust him, promising that he will make sure everyone leaves with a treasure. The platinum-haired one reflects that this is one of the 14 elite demons, the Skeleton King's most trusted subordinate, personally trained by him, but also just an idiot who was captured by the Pope's house. Before arriving there, he studied the demon and prepared a sacred art to deal with it and ensure he could take the treasure. It doesn't take long for Kina to use his sacred art, making his eyes glow. Suddenly, he creates a massive light with terrifying eyes and orders the demon to kneel. All the children are in disbelief at the scene, except, of course, for the protagonist. The boy, smiling, thinks that it worked, and that now he only needs to take the Skeleton King's body. But before he can do anything, he hears the demon calling him. Looking ahead, he sees that the demon is staring at him with eyes as red as fire. Then, the demon asks if he is the one coveting the king's body. Meanwhile, at the vault's entrance, the children's parents, nervous, wonder what is happening inside since they have lost contact with the familiar demon. Soon, the servant who is broadcasting live arrives, informing them that the seal of the third chamber's demon has been removed, which is alarming. This makes the parents even more anxious, including Uncle Relai, who hears his childhood friend questioning whether the third chamber's demon isn't one of the 14 elite demons. But Relai ignores him, thinking to himself about what is happening inside and pondering that everyone is in danger with an elite demon. Another parent questions the Eshua family members about the elders monitoring the vault, and the old man responds that they went to try to deactivate the traps and haven't been heard from since, which the old woman adds means the children are in danger. She emphasizes that it's impossible for them to handle that demon and that they must stop the ceremony immediately to get them out of there. Meanwhile, a light begins to emerge from an arch in the mansion behind them and soon starts shining intensely, making everyone present cover their eyes and wonder what is happening. But Relai, watching closely, ponders whether the vault is opening. The light grows stronger and stronger, and a servant urges everyone to move away from the entrance because demonic energy is leaking and could be dangerous. But an elder interrupts him and, pointing at the light, says he doesn't sense the demon's aura. This makes the old woman question whether the boys defeated the elite demon, while Kina's father, smiling, thinks she must have done a good job. Soon, the parents begin to wonder if one of the children was really capable of defeating the Skeleton King's body's guardian. Gol, worried, calls Relai and says that it was probably Kina Barrett who did it. This makes him bite his lips in anger. Slightly, an elder approaches Here, congratulating him, and others also comment that there is no doubt Kina is the best candidate for saint. Here says that his son has always worked hard, and looking at Relai with disdain, thinks that the ignorant Eshua dared to challenge the authority of the Pope's house. And now that the Skeleton King's body is in their hands, they have no choice but to bow before the Barrett. With this, the dignity and honor of the Eshua must be destroyed at this point. Suddenly, someone informs them that the children are returning. Immediately, Here and Relai look closely, and the Eshua, anxious, watches the children returning and hopes that Isaac and Shuri are safe. Soon, the children exit the challenge, and observing that they are scared and hugging their parents, Relai notices that they are injured, but seemingly not too seriously, which is a good sign. But they quickly realize that the children who entered the third chamber have not yet returned, which worries them, as they wonder if something has happened. Relai, still apprehensive about Isaac and Shuri, hears someone say that the last children are leaving. Then, Shuri and Amon begin to walk out, accompanied by other boys, all visibly shaken. Immediately, Gol and Relai run toward the children, and hugging Shuri, Gol asks if everything is okay and if he is unharmed. Meanwhile, Relai, noticing that Isaac has not come out, starts heading toward the chambers, wondering where he is. Beside him, Here sees his son among the other children. Slightly, he walks over to his son and asks what that is in his hands and where the Skeleton King's body is. Kina, holding a small treasure in his hands and completely terrified, trembling with fear of his father's reaction, is unable to say a word. Mr. Barrett, irritated, asks who told him to bring that garbage and does not notice the light appearing behind him. Quickly, the light begins to emit an intense glow, catching the attention of some present, who start pointing at it. Suddenly, the light takes the form of a wolf carrying a baby in its mouth. Instantly, Relai is shocked to realize that Isaac is really being carried by that immense and imposing golden wolf. Without hesitation, he runs toward the wolf, and Ashley follows him. Looking at the beast up close, she recognizes that the wolf is the young sacred dragon that protects the vault. The others around confirm that it is indeed the treasure guardian, a dragon, and even though it is in wolf form now, they can see it is the sacred dragon's energy. Relai, unable to believe what he is seeing, remembers that the matriarch has a good relationship with the dragon and invited it to stay in the vault. Being in its presence is something unbelievable. With that, he and Ashley start walking toward the protagonist, while the people notice a strange noise. Quickly, they realize the sound is coming from Isaac, who has something in his mouth. This throws everyone into a panic, wondering if what Isaac is sucking on is the Skeleton King's body. An old man nearly faints upon seeing it, and asks why he put that in his mouth, while an elder shouts that the boy really brought the Skeleton King's body. Hearing this, Kina hears his father calling him, and, in a dark tone, asking if he was the one who gave that to Isaac. Before he could answer, Here says that it may not have been the best plan, but it's good to let the guests savor their victory for now. These words catch Relai's attention, and before he can retort, everyone hears a voice asking what kind of stupid conversation that is, emphasizing that it was the baby who took the Skeleton King's body. This information nearly gives Here a heart attack, while Kina closes his eyes in fear of his father's reaction. Remembering what happened, the boy wonders why the sacred art did not work against that demon who, furious, called him a cursed worm and exuding a dense demonic energy, attacked them mercilessly. Focusing on him, the demon struck with great force, causing a powerful impact and sending rocks flying. However, upon opening their eyes, the boys realized they were being protected by a magical defense barrier, a blue sacred art. Seeing that Isaac was outside, running with the quick step technique, they wonder if he was the one who created the barrier. Having his attack blocked, the monster fills with rage and calls them filthy clerics, questioning how they dare to touch the Skeleton King's body. Seeing Isaac charging forward, He does not hesitate and also prepares to attack. But Isaac, concentrating power in his fist, delivers a powerful blow that raises a gigantic blue smoke and asks if that idiot cannot even recognize his own master. Returning to the present, everyone is impressed by the wolf's revelation that Isaac had taken the treasure and begins questioning what Kina had done in the chamber. Near the Guardian, Relai comments that it must have been very dangerous for one of the 14 elite demons to face a child and questions why the dragon removed the seal. With a smile, the Guardian explains that it was the white-haired boy who asked for the seal to be broken. Soon, the black-clothed boy confirms, emphasizing that he had even requested all the traps in the third chamber to be activated, and another boy adds that Kina also forced them to enter, almost resulting in a tragedy. This makes all the parents start commenting that Kina was responsible for nearly causing a great disaster and questioning how a child from the Pope's household could do such a thing. One of the parents also questions whether Isaac really defeated Kina Barrett, making Hooray almost have a heart attack out of rage. They continue, saying it is incredible that a boy who wasn't even considered a saint is so strong, and it must be true that the Eshua are trying to regain their strength. Relai, full of pride, thinks to himself that young Isaac did an excellent job. It doesn't take long before family members approach the wolf, asking him to release the boy and also asking Isaac to be good and come down. Trying to pull him, they immediately receive a slap to keep them in check, which impresses them with the force of the blow. The protagonist reflects that this mana is very good, and due to his survival origin, he must be absorbing it quickly. Soon, the grumpy old woman appears, saying that Isaac has really outdone himself, which will surely make the matriarch happy, and Relai agrees. Then she gives a bizarre smile and says that now that they have the item, they can finally track the Skeleton King and find his soul with the tracking art. Hearing that, the protagonist widens his eyes and realizes that this is why they wanted his body so much, and when he looks ahead, he sees several family members with their hands outstretched, eager to grab the item, saying they will use the tracking art and put an end to the Skeleton King once and for all, making him think that this family really is full of psychopaths. One of the old men comments that, finally, all the hatred of the last 150 years will be repaid, and extends his hand to take the bone that is with the protagonist. But quickly, the wolf crouches, preparing to jump, and after Isaac swallows the Skeleton King's finger, the wolf leaps away while the protagonist says they are all crazy and hopes never to see them again. A few days later, at the Eshua family mansion, two family elders are searching for something. The old man asks if the old woman managed to find it, and she, poking something with a stick, replies that it apparently isn't there. They were searching for the item in the protagonist's diapers, and desperate, wonder why he still hasn't expelled it, while the young master, watching irritated, thinks that they can search all day, but the Skeleton King's finger will not come out. Then he begins to reflect that he should worry more about what happened in the vault. He remembers that after attacking the demon and completely sinking his face, he heard him say that he recognized that mana and asked if he was his master. Soon, the demon realizes that Isaac is indeed his master and comments that he thought his world had ended when he heard the news that he had been exterminated, but emphasizes that he always had hopes that he would return. With his face completely battered after the protagonist's blow, he states that he must serve him, making Isaac regret not staying longer to talk, as he still has many questions to be answered. Returning to the present, he remembers some comments saying that it was the Pope's house that captured him and decides to investigate it later, until, out of nowhere, someone offers him a baby bottle. It's Relai, who, desperate, yells for him to poop again and orders the servants to bring stronger laxatives. This makes Whisper nearly pee himself from laughing so hard, while the protagonist, holding back his own laughter, thinks that he really will destroy that family someday. A family elder, apprehensive, comments that if the matriarch finds out about this, they will all be executed, and she might even cut open Isaac's stomach. But Relai tells him to calm down, assuring that everything will be fine. However, he soon changes his mind, and both of them become completely terrified when they remember that she once cut the side of her own son's stomach, though she might go easier on her grandson. Hearing that, the observer asks if she isn't currently on a pilgrimage with the patriarch, and the protagonist confirms, believing that she will take a while to finish. So, he needs to absorb the mana and escape before he finishes the sentence. Goal appears, opening the door and entering the room, asking Relai to accompany him because the matriarch is calling for him. This surprises him, and he questions whether she has really arrived already, as she has never returned so quickly from a pilgrimage. The protagonist, equally surprised, deduces that she came back because of him, which makes him think that this will be dangerous, since he hasn't finished absorbing all the mana yet, and knowing how she is, she will definitely cut open his stomach. Moments later, in a room filled with treasures, The family members are impressed by the quantity and wonder if they are all gifts for Isaac. Noticing that Melissa is not there, Relai sighs in relief, and Gol, spreading his arms, calls him a coward and informs him that they also received a voice message from her saying that she was already on her way back home, and he never said she was there. The protagonist becomes furious upon realizing that he was also deceived. Soon, a paladin appears, announcing that the Pope's house has also sent a gift. An elder responds, saying they could sell it as if it were a stolen item, but the paladin informs them that a messenger from the Pope is listening and waiting nearby. Everyone turns to see him approaching, and the messenger states that the emperor has shown great interest in that incident, and, for this reason, they decided to offer a gift on behalf of the Pope's house as an apology for their rudeness, and also as a symbol of gratitude. Smiling, he adds that, however, it seems the gift does not suit the tastes of the Yeshua house. Opening a box, the messenger affirms that, in any case, he can guarantee that they will change their minds as soon as they see the gift. A strong light begins to shine from the box, leaving everyone anxious, while the messenger emphasizes that the cardinal said it would be of great help to young Master Isaac. The elders are astonished to see that the gift is a triple crown. However, the protagonist is confused and does not recognize the item, while Whisper comments that it looks like a very dirty medal with the Pope's engraving on it. The family members cannot believe that the Pope actually gave a medal to Isaac. Soon, the messenger calls Relai, asking him please to accept the gift on behalf of the young master. This makes the protagonist wonder why the medal is being given to his uncle, since if the gift is for him, they should hand it to him directly. Trembling, Relai asks if the Pope specifically requested that he deliver the medal instead of giving it to Isaac, which the messenger confirms. With a smile, he states that he was ordered to deliver the medal to another family member, no matter what. Hearing this, Relai begins to grow irritated, and an elder questions how he dares to give Isaac's medal to someone else. Pointing his finger, and with a serious expression, he asks if the messenger knows what it means to give the medal to someone else, explaining that it symbolizes that the owner of the medal is dead. Immediately, the protagonist and the observer are shocked upon hearing that. The messenger, somewhat embarrassed, politely asks them not to misunderstand His Holiness's intentions, as the Pope simply wishes for the medal to be given to another family member since Isaac is too young to keep it. However, the elder retorts, saying that this is no justification and questions whether the Pope truly does not know that a sunflower is used to represent soldiers who died as honored heroes. This makes the protagonist realize that they truly want him to sleep in a small coffin, concluding that the Pope is indeed a bastard. Even the grumpy old woman gets nervous about it and comments that they dare to humiliate them directly for being cursed. However, Goel, remaining calmer, asks everyone to restrain themselves, but the elder ignores him, questioning how he could stay calm in the face of such humiliation. Then, Goel says that the elder represents the Yeshua house, and that they cannot create a conflict with the Pope's house, as it could become a problem for the family. Deep down, he reflects that he never imagined it was possible to humiliate someone so much with a simple gift, and concludes that this must have been the cardinal's doing. Even though he is part of his maternal family, it does not change the fact that he despises him. He also reflects that now, Relai and the brat will no longer be able to run away forever, which will be advantageous for him. After thinking, he questions Relai about that attitude, asking him to just accept the gift and show some gratitude. When Relai tries to retort, he hears Goel saying that there is no need to make a storm in a teacup. Observing all this, the protagonist realizes that he will have to act. Then, he starts manipulating the metal, making it emit a faint energy, which quickly intensifies, startling the messenger, who drops the object. Everyone looks at the metal, frightened, and sees a great concentration of energy, recognizing it as the sacred flame, which makes them question who could be using the sacred flame in that way. Terrified, the messenger begins to tremble in fear, his eyes wide open. Soon, they notice that Isaac, with his hand extended and a smile on his face, is the one responsible for it.